I'm going to be a leftist here and say patriarchy.
Women are going to school, graduating, and earning more money. But if you were to have a man that was stepping into what a woman did, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, where he's like, hey, I'm decently attractive, I'm young, and I can take care of a house really well, any working woman, or most of them, would look at that man and go, that guy's a fucking loser. I'm not going to date that guy. I don't want a house husband.
I disagree.
Based on what?
It can be based on the two studies I linked.
Eastern societies tend to be, especially like in Asian, what have you, and this person might be wrong, I don't know, tend to be more matriarchal. But these are things that we have been conditioned over here in Western society to believe. Not only that, but are we ever gonna address the MILFs in the room?
You could imagine biologically women are wired to get on the baby train a little bit sooner than men might be wired to, because men can afford to wait a lot longer than women can.
I mean,
How was that?
maybe?
Hold on, wait. What part of that is August? 60-second insert for Minds. Take 1. Cut. Go. Action. Wow. The goal of this event. Wait, why do I have chat on the screen? I can't have chat on the screen when I do this. Try again. Fix your hair? My hair is fixed. I like it like this, okay? It makes me look intense, all right? It makes me look like I've got a headband on, like I'm about to go jog 3.1 miles, okay? Let's do our 5Ks, guys, okay? Okay. Look, now I look like a fucking hobo. Take 2. Action. My mic was too low. Hold on, I'm sorry. Take 3. Hello, guys. Did you know that the Minds Festival Ideas is bringing diverse thinkers together in real life at the Beacon Theater in New York City on June 25th in order to elevate global discourse and have conversations about the controversial topics of these times? The goal of this event is to create a space to engage honestly with others in open dialogue surrounding divisive ideas in the hopes of bridging the current divide to create a path to a healthier discourse and to reduce extremism. Minds.com is also an open source and decentralized social network focused on free expression, privacy, transparency, and monetization. Wow. They wrote their own paper with a team of PhDs outlining their online and offline strategy for dialogue and analyzing the empirical research on how censorship can actually increase radicalization through social isolation, which I'm sure is going to be linked below this video. I'll also have links for you guys to buy tickets. I think you can buy normal tickets. I think you can buy VIP tickets. And I think the live stream is selling tickets. I will be doing an event there where I'm going to be doing an hour stream on a roof in a hotel. That's all I can say. I might even have Tulsi Gabbard on stream. Oh my God, maybe, but don't quote me on that. But I'll be able to talk to other streamers while I'm streaming on the rooftop before the event. I will be in New York City for this event the night before and that night. I think I'm doing, I believe I'll be there for the VIP stuff as well, but I don't know 100% on how that's going to roll out. But I believe that is on the 25th. So check the links below. Buy tickets. I will see you there in New York City. Okay. Have fun. Boom. Okay.
How are men failing in relationships? What are some unfair societal expectations for men when it comes to dating, and how do they navigate this? Plus, what are some fair criticisms and societal expectations for men, and how can they be better? So this is all about men dating in modern world. Where are they struggling? What is valid? Where are they failing? What's not valid? And how can they improve? We'll kind of start with an opening statement. Try to be decently brief, like a minute, 2 minutes max. I'll maybe start with Meat first.
Yeah, it's hard to almost even have an opening statement because a lot of this stuff gets so complicated. I guess, like, in the sense that it might be helpful for kicking it off, I guess, I'll just say, the way I think about, like, unfair and affair expectations are in the sense of what we might be able to say we can reasonably expect to change. And when we look at it through that lens, I guess, it's almost hard to get into it without just going off and listing specifics, but maybe that is almost brief enough. I guess I just think there's a lot of interesting things that get that axis, that exact distinction between what is like a fair and unfair expectation, I guess, is where a lot of the problems come into, where like between men and women in dating spheres, and people start to become resentful of each other.
Awesome. Okay. I'll go up to Hans next.
So basic things here. A lot of men struggle with fulfilling, I'd say, traditional benchmarks of success have been for a long time used to attract women, whether it's say having a successful career, a job, money, a place to themselves, at least till like they're older. So I can see a lot of younger men being frustrated because they've been either denied or unsuccessful in fulfilling those, and it makes it hard for them to attract another person. But I think at the other time, there's a certain amount of pushback against the concept of like people providing value in relationships. And the idea of like, oh, people just love me for me. And I think a lot of men struggle in providing any sort of value to relationships in regards to whether is it humor, is it money, is it like interesting conversation, is it activities that you can do with somebody. And so I think we have to understand that there are struggles that a lot of men face in terms of like being the traditional successful man, but also that you have to do something to be a good partner and be worth being within relationships. So.
Awesome. Destiny?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's like 27 different levels that we can analyze this on, but I think like broadly speaking, I think socially we have kind of like moved a lot of the gender roles around in terms of women are now achieving more in college and in the workplace, and men are expected to be more emotional. And I think that in kind of this mix up of where we came from and where we are now and where we're headed, I think there's a lot of confusion about what people are expected to do. Like men don't know, like, are we supposed to, can some of us be housewives now? Women don't know, like, can I date down socioeconomically? Women are like, should I still value a man for his success? Men are like, do I still value women just for their looks? Like, there's kind of a lot of confusion there socially about everything that's going on. We're kind of sorting through the mess of that socially now.
Awesome. Cam?
Basically, the same things I would say. There is certain social expectations from men that are put by patriarchal norms that have been in place for decades over decades, and a lot of men are either still being indoctrinated into following these blindly, or being not necessarily bullied, but they're not guided into how to better themselves. That's causing a lot of troubles because a lot of men are not enough for themselves, let alone for a relationship.
Awesome. And Eli?
Yeah. So I do think that there's probably going to be some things that men might struggle with in relationships. I feel like a lot of it possibly might have to deal with it might have to come down to like, maturity type things. It also is like, I guess, weird expectations or unfair expectations when going into a relationship of like what both people within a relationship should do, what both people should provide, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the ways in which men might fail or struggle, or one of the things that really makes it hard for men within dating, is probably the red pill community. I think the red pill community does pose a bit of a problem for men, because a lot of men who don't exactly understand socialization will fall down like the pipeline of the red pill community and their propaganda and advertising, and as a result may trip up in relationships. But yeah, that's about it for me.
Awesome. So I'm going to open the floor. Does anybody have a direct response, or do you want me to prompt with another question?
Yeah, for Monte in particular. So I completely agree with you that a lot of like the prescription of the red pill community are like extremely shitty. But I feel like we have to provide some sort of positive framework instead.
Yeah.
For men, so what would you recommend for men in that respect? Is like there's a lot of things that in like about red pill stuff, like trying to be confident, trying to be successful, that they like have a lot of like shitty women hitting stuff in there, like messed in. But there's still like positive aspects of bettering yourself and that sort of thing. What would you put there instead?
So I 100% agree. Like, I think one of the best ways in which we can counter the really toxic red pill community is by, going through with maybe our own content and our own platforms, and maybe dissecting some of the points that they that they make in their videos and their podcasts that may be a bit harmful, explaining like why it's harmful, explaining like how actually this is the exact opposite of what you want to do if you want to have like any sort of like fruitful relationship, not even just with women, but with people in general. Because there's been some things that I've heard come out of these people's mouths where it's like this is something that should, if anything, trigger some dudes too, like, or get some dudes like riled up and angry, or and what have you. I think just countering it with our own sort of like wholesome content of like, the best kind of dating advice there is, which is, be yourself, be open-minded, listen to him or her when they're talking, not just listening to try to, listening to respond and, toot your own horn. You know what I mean? Like, just be a decent somebody or half decent person with the way in which you socialize. I think socialization, when you just, when you don't overthink it, is a pretty easy thing to do. Self-reflection is another good one. Teaching men in particular, how to self-reflect and why you should self-reflect, why self-reflecting is important. And again, not even with just like, this is where we get into the intersectionality part of it. Not even just with like
Wrap it up in the
relationship
next two sentences.
Yeah, but also just that will help you with just socializing in general with people.
I think that I think that one of the issues when people on the left talk about anything is for some reason they are petrified of talking about some things that are factually true. And when you're unwilling to engage with things that are factually true, I think that it creates a market for somebody that is willing to engage with that, even if they have horrible things to say. I think that the red pill community and the MRA community and the MGTOW, whatever far, super male dating communities you want to talk about, or PUA stuff, I think that the problem is that a lot of the times they're willing to address things that are most likely true that people on the left are really scared of talking about. So like, for instance, men tend to be attracted to younger women that look good. Women tend to be attracted to older men that make more money than them or can provide some level of like financial stability. It feels like when left people like look at stuff like this, they're very keen to like scream about either the patriarchy or unfair gender roles or blah, 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 which in an ideal world might be worth deconstructing. But in the world we live in now, it seems to line up with like lived experience or reality like 98% of the time. And I think on the left, if we want to do a better job at reaching out to people, we have to be willing to meet people like where they are. And it's like, okay, this is true. Let's talk about this, or, how can we deal with this particular thing?
Yeah, I agree with that a lot, because I feel like a lot of something that I would say is a fair criticism of guys in this space is that like when you look at a lot of criticisms, a lot of the time when people bring up things like that, the response is exactly what you just talked about. Whereas like I find that a way more helpful response is to say that's fine for women to like value those things. Like that's why like I think that's the distinction between fair and unfair. Is it's like we talked about. I think a few of the opening statements sort of got into like how these roles shift over time, and to some extent we shouldn't necessarily expect to just be able to like talk about it and for these roles to shift on their own. To some extent, I think like we need to have space for these roles to be like, I guess like you're saying like a valuable or valid in the present day. And I feel like there's a lot of room. Like one of the criticisms that I would make a lot of men is making it. And I feel like it's weird because the right and the left will do this in their weird ways. The left will do it like indirectly, and the like MGTOW groups will do it directly. We'll put all the blame on women for just having expectations that are inherently unfair, or like we just blame it on some societal pressure that we're being brainwashed in, that we're growing up in. And some of that's probably fair, but I think we probably hurt ourselves when we frame it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like on the right, like people will blame women for everything, but then on the left, it feels like people are keen to blame men for everything too. Like I feel like I could step into a left-leaning area and I could say something like, you know what, women value men that make more money, and that's okay. Having some level of stability in life is good if they're expected to bear children and take care of kids. Like, yeah, I think that's a totally fine expectation. I think everybody like, yeah, true, for absolutely sure. But if I were to say something, you know what? A lot of men want women that are like 24 and younger and look hot and can have kids and stuff. I feel like people are like, this is horrible, this is unfair, that's the patriarchy, you should blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. Like, how can one gender have like what is more or less in line with the things that they expect and want and have wanted for a long time? But then when you talk about the other side, people get like really ass mad depending on which community that you're talking to. Yeah.
Are we comparing, just to clarify, are we comparing in one hand women who did not have even the right to work up until like, I don't know, fucking 50s, I guess, and then on the other hand, men who will go for people who are significantly younger than them because they don't have the fucking social understandings or the skills to actually flirt with their own age? Are we comparing the two?
Yeah.
So,
that's a loaded question because that's not really the reason, right?
No, I think it's a perfect question. I think it's fine. Because women do have the right to work today, and there's a reason why men can go after younger women, but younger men don't typically go after older women. You have to be able to engage with these things rather than just like state them and go, that's crazy. Like you have to be able to engage with the reasons why it happens, right?
But
it's
then
not-
Destiny,
it-
we get into things like, okay, so we have to ask ourselves if we really want to like explore these topics and these societal norms, or things that we say are societal norms. What's the reasoning for, men looking for younger women? What is the reason for women looking for older men that are financially stable or what have you? Because I would say in many cases, if a woman is looking for a man that is older and that makes more money, would it be something along the lines of simply a maturity aspect that she might not find within younger men? Maybe just engaging with your example and your question there. I would say we would need to look at, once we ask ourselves those questions, then we start getting into like the nitty gritty of the conversation of like, okay, what's going on that causes, men to do this thing and then women to do that thing. And that opens up the conversation entirely to a lot of other different things. But I think if anything, those things would come down to patriarchy and things that have been norms built up in society for a while now.
Yeah, we just have to be
Okay,
careful
but-
when we talk about norms built up in society. Like, if something has existed for all of human history, there is probably like reasons why these things exist. So if we're going to speak in contrast to them, we have to be aware of those like really strong forces that are moving in a certain direction that we're going to be working against to do otherwise. So like, for instance, when you say, well, women are looking for older men because of things like what, like maturity? Yeah, probably. Women probably want men that are more mature. A lot of guys don't give a fuck at all like how mature a girl is though, right? That's like a thing that you have to be aware of. So there, again, like I said, there's a reason why younger women will tend to go for older men, but younger women will tend to go for older men, but younger men don't tend to go for older women, right? I think these are things to be aware of, and we can't just say like patriarchy over and over again because everybody else is looking like, well, this is how we feel about everything, and that doesn't really get us anywhere in the conversation.
And it's
Where-
not
where-
and it's not just like age though, because I feel like a lot of age correlates with a lot of things that like women supposedly want, whether it's like stability, whether it's financial security. There are things that like being older tend to correlate with. So like if there's like a younger successful man in his 20s who has that sort of stuff kind of taken care of, they're probably not facing the same roadblocks that say like a lot of like other younger men might be facing, like compared to an older man. So like,
Why do we think that men don't care about maturity?
Because they just don't. They don't tend to. Men tend to want people that like look young and can have kids. It just seems to be in general what men are after. Otherwise, you'd see a lot more men going after older women, but that isn't generally the case.
Would disagree, or maybe it's because like I'm just different from a lot of other men in the sense that like, uh, in the sense that like, I have been one that's typically gone after like, or tried to go after like older women, and I do actually from
How old are
dating
you?
women.
and what's the age
Me?
gap? Like, yeah, how old are you? And then what's the age gap of like women like you have a tendency
Like
to go after?
I'm
Like,
26, but like I would not be afraid to talk to someone who's potentially 10 years older than me. Like I wouldn't like if she's attractive and we meshed, like I wouldn't care. Like now in my current and permanent relationship, she and I are very close in age, probably like maybe just a few months apart, or maybe like half a year apart in terms of age. With me being older, but I mean, I think no offense to Destiny, but I think what he brought up with I think you brought up a little bit of like some stereotypes there. I think these are sort of like harmful stereotypes that, or maybe I shouldn't say harmful, but they're just not like they're just not really the best way in which the best lens I think to view this through, because there are a lot of men out there that do go after older women or women more along their age, and there are a lot of women out there who look at older men and go, that's gross, that this guy would be interested in me, or that I would be interested in him, or whatever, like
Yeah,
I think that's sort of an old norm that like it's starting to be smashed more, and a mold that's being broken.
Yeah, I would say no. There's not. There's not really a ton of women that are going after younger men. There's not really a ton of men that are going after older women. Like there is a reason why when you talk to men, like, are you really worried about turning like 30 or 35? Like generally, no. This isn't most things that men care about. They're usually, hopefully, if they're doing well in their careers, they're hitting like their peak in their careers in terms of like the stability and the areas of success on how we define success for men in their life. They're usually like hitting this stride in their 30s, hopefully. Like for men, like as life gets into their 30s, things are generally going pretty well. For women, there's a lot of pressure. Like if you're 30 and single and you're not dating somebody yet, like you can almost feel like, fuck, like I fucked up or something is not working well in my life. The things that society tends to value women for, and women sometimes even, and men tend to value other women for, things like youthfulness and ability to have kids and all this, is that is starting to like lose that peak, or arguably it has by the time you hit 30. I mean, I agree with you that the stereotypes suck. And I agree with you that even biologically, it's not very interesting, right? I don't want to just date somebody who's 20, they can have kids. I think that's boring personally. I like people that are more mature. I agree with you there. But you have to be able to speak to what most people are feeling. And you can't just say that like, oh, well, these are just stereotypes. Well, these are stereotypes that exist for reasons and have for like, or not hundreds of thousands, 200,000 years is how long we've existed, I guess, for thousands and thousands of years.
I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
it's like
ask,
you need to be careful
where
not
you
to
get that from.
stigmatize things that are inevitable, right? Like that's where you're going to run into problems with your ability to communicate, like based on some shared descriptive reality.
I mean, again, I would just ask,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Hans.
I'm not entirely sure that it is inevitable though, but like we're starting to see like clashings in terms of like societal progress versus different norms, where like the idea is like a woman won't date down in terms of income, right? But like what Desi said about like women getting more degrees and like earning more in the workplace, like we're working on that pay gap, right? If it's like 1 in 5 women won't date a man who makes less money than them, then and men aren't making like say as much comparatively as they used to, then we're gonna start having some societal tension in regards to like, because like the dating pool inevitably shrinks in regards to how we handle that. So either we have to get say more women in line with dating men who make less than them, which I think is totally fine and great. We have to get to that point, make women more comfortable doing that. Or like we'd have to like settle for like the existing, say, like gender, like pay gap stuff, which is pretty shitty. I don't think anyone really wants to do that if they're interested in societal progress. So like, where do you go from that? Because like you don't want to keep women down, but we also want to like say make women more accepting to like the men who aren't like gigachat earners, right?
Well, to be honest, I feel like a lot of these things on a societal level are more like operating as heuristics that we use in dating. Like, for example, and I think the science bears out on this if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the studies to pull up or anything, but like women, maybe this sounds naive of me almost, but women, I don't really think care so much about money specifically. A lot of the times, like when the guy rolls up in a great car, don't get me wrong, a lot of women like a great car, but I think even if they don't realize it, a lot of the reason why women might like money, they might like a great car, is because they like what it indicates about the man. And while I think that you bring up a great point, like I do think that there will be changes, there are going to be difficulties in how we handle these things. It's the underlying, there's an inevitable underlying truth that is still to some extent staying to change there. I just think that like the like heuristic analyses, the judgments that women have to make, they might have to be more lenient, and when they're thinking about like money as a heuristic or something, but there's still some underlying like competence, maturity, some things like that they're still like looking for underneath the money, right? Like
that underlying thing is like stability. Like, can you take care of me though? Right? Like we keep going back to maturity, but like a really mature guy that doesn't have a job and lives with his parents is not going to make it as far as an immature guy that can provide like a stable household, stable income. I do agree that like people don't care about the money, but it is a proxy for stability. What?
Right.
It's a massive schism poster. I can absolutely say that like an unstable man with a stable income like does pretty well. It just
Sure. Wait,
like I would just say like, because I've heard like horror stories about like, you hear these all the time about where like men who are well on in their careers, but they're shitty personality wise, and they live lives being alone because they're shitty people. So like I guess Destiny, I would have to push back and ask like, where are you getting this data or this info from, or what causes you to have this view of men tend to be like this, women tend to be like this? I would need like some sort of like data or statistic, what have you, because from my lens, from my own personal dating experience, like it's been everything but that. Like I've been the broke guy. I've been the guy that's had like the broke down hoopty car, but still is able to be very successful with my relationships with women. Like at the start of my relationship, or at the start of my relationship, I was predominantly the house husband. Like there's been many times in my life where my partner has pulled more money or more weight than me, and in many cases, or at least in many cases with my dating life, this has not been a deterrent or has made me any less successful, because I think times are changing more, and because of the fact that I am a more mature person, or present myself to be a more mature person relationship wise, to where she doesn't even care. It doesn't really affect me.
Monty,
I mean,
I
if
just
you-
put it in. I just put it in the chat. But like, if you're looking for like the evidence stuff, so 22.
Okay.
There was a study from 2017. Like 22% of women said they wouldn't date down. Only 4% of men said that. 69% of women said they'd be uncomfortable footing all the bills, compared with 46% of men. So it's not like it's every man or every woman. The idea is that there are general trends that we absolutely can acknowledge, and that's where a lot of like these stereotypes come from. And if we're trying to dismantle these stereotypes, we still have to like contend with the real world existing and like end these like gaps that I would say are relatively like steep. Like again, 4% of men versus 22% of women. That's that's almost a fifth of the population in terms of like their differences in responses like to dating. So we have to like acknowledge that, even if like you personally like have done like relatively well at like say like broker times of your life, because like I'm sure that because there's still 78% of women who would date you if they make more money than you, but like there's still more women that wouldn't than compared to man who wouldn't date a woman.
Yeah, and then there's
But, like,
we've also
I would
got
say
there's like a study here
even
that shows that
then-
like people are preferring like men that have average higher income, men that are more likely to be employed. I mean, like the data is, we don't need to do data. I feel like data is boring. You can look at this study. You can go to page 2 where they graph out across 4 different dating markets like what the desirability rank is of like men versus women. You see that women like whoop, it just slides off. It starts at the highest as 20 and it gets lower and lower and lower. Whereas for men, it starts off at its lowest at 20 and then at around 35, 40, 50. Like it starts like you can see this like socially when you look culturally, like, well, who gets matched with who in movies that's like desirable to people. You see like very old male actors getting young matched with very young female actors. I mean, like this is ubiquitous throughout society. I don't want to say it's self-evident because that's obviously, if we disagree on things, for both of us to say it's self-evident, it's silly. But like you talk about, for instance, like hearing horror stories of like, men, older men that end up being shitty in relationships and stuff. That's true. But why do those horror stories exist? It's because women are still willing to give them a chance. You don't hear very many horror stories of younger men dating older women because a lot of guys won't even do it. And then, yeah, even like what Hans said earlier, like the younger men. What?
Or maybe it's just that it's less likely to, fall apart when you just have like when you have two people that are on the same page, like maturity wise and like, just relationship wise. Like, and also someone dropped a study from like 2017, and someone in my chat brought something that should be considered. That's 2017. We're 5 years ahead, and a lot can change in 5 years. And I think a lot has changed in 5 years. I would argue that a lot has changed in 2 years even. Especially
but
now, like the
but
current year.
I wanna
still think if you walk out and
drop in there. I wanna drop in there. I'm sorry. I wanna drop in there and ask a question because we are talking about like these things that we see as like, okay, this is how it works. This is how it works, and we are talking about studies and everything, and we are talking specifically about women's preferences right now. And let's forget about the victim blaming attitude with the pick a better man than where you're giving them a chance, and that is why this is happening to you. Let's forget about that for a second. Why do we think that women are, going for men who can provide them stability, and men are going for women who are, younger than them, or based on their looks, or more immature, I suppose? Because we are looking at this from a again, Destiny said in the beginning, I'm going to be a leftist here and say patriarchy all over, because those are things that are caused by patriarchy. Once again, with the men being the ones that are always like the breadwinners, and women being the ones, the nurturing and stay at home, whatever. You're looking at this from perspective of a very dogmatic way, that you think that men's responsibility in general is to earn more. They don't need to be mature, and you are assuming that women are just going to be fine with that, when we see all around the fucking social media, even in movies, that those things cause extremely toxic relationships.
So something that I think we need to be really careful of when we analyze social order or social structures, like things like patriarchy, is I feel like for a lot of left-leaning people, they have a backwards analysis where they assume that we have a certain like system of people, and then somebody came and they like instantiated patriarchy and then tried to ramrod all of society through that, rather than what's probably more likely is through certain social organizations, these other systems tend to emerge, where patriarchy is one of those things. So patriarchy tends to emerge in like almost every society in recorded human history for the past 10,000 years. Now, that's not to say that patriarchy is good or that women should be oppressed. I like that women can vote. I like women that have jobs. I think that stuff is really cool. But we have to acknowledge that these things are probably emerging over and over and over and over again for probably like underlying reasons that we need to address. And again, like we
Or
can
maybe again and again, we had a lot of propaganda again in movies, in shows, in politics, in music, and everything that is affecting society and everything that is, indoctrinating us with certain, through maintaining certain systems of power instead of it being a natural occurrence. Because in hunter-gatherer societies and what is usually called in sociology, I don't know if you like to hear this, but in primitive communist societies, there were no, gender roles with, how people were operating. Now we've been taught throughout years that there were, but we have strong archaeological and anthropological data today shows us that women were also hunters and men were also gatherers. So this wasn't the case until, like you said, like this past, 10,000 years in our history of 200,000 years. So we need to look at this not as a natural occurrence, but something that has been taught to the society, taught to us from, childhood, where people are like, oh yeah, boys are protectors, boys cannot cry, they need to be like strong and tough or whatever the shit, and women or like girls need to be like, oh, they need to play with Barbies and cooking sets and shit like
But if
that.
like 99, so my question would be like,
Yeah.
my question to you would be if like 99.9% of societies, because I don't know about that, I'm just going to bite that bullet theoretically of that. I don't know the details of those people, of the people you just referenced, but like even if I were to bite that bullet, if 99.9% of like human societies had X characteristic, and you pointed to 0.01% that didn't, wouldn't it be more reasonable to assume that that was the instance of some type of like overbearing socialization within the society, as opposed to some underlying like inevitable human quality that's sort of, at least to some extent, substantiating the system?
What do you mean?
I'm not entirely sure you can do that. So there's like a couple things here. So the first part would be that's entirely possible that all of like our more modern societies, like over the last 10,000 years, they specialized, right? Like in the case of say like men versus women, like they got like stratified into different roles because of like say different like biological advantages or disadvantages that like say weren't as like explicitly necessary or needed in less generalized societies, like the more generalized societies in the past, right? So it's entirely possible. The second thing is like for like Comrade Com, right? Just because like you can describe something doesn't mean that like we inherently agree with it, right? So like Destiny's saying that that patriarchy exists and that we're like talking about solutions inside like the scope of the patriarchy isn't like a tacit endorsement of like that existing. It's the idea of the descriptivity versus prescriptivity. Like this isn't what we're saying that has to happen. We're saying what is happening. So when we're talking about our solutions, it's important that we don't like go out into like fantasy land and say we should like return to, let's say, like generalized space hunter-gatherer communism, and like that'll solve all of our gender problems.
Yeah, like
Clearly,
I
there are
think
issues in society.
I think it'd be cool if everybody like had different preferences across the board that weren't so heavily gendered. But I mean, like the fact of the matter is that like a 20-year-old woman can walk into almost any male-dominated space on any part of this planet and pull a ton of different guys if she's medium levels of attractiveness, and a 30-year-old successful man can walk into a ton of female-dominated areas and pull like decently attractive women. Like that's just a fact of the world right now. Now, whether it's because of patriarchy or because of whatever, I mean, like we can point to those things, we can try to dismantle those systems, and we should, but we have to be able to speak to the reality of the world that we live in right now and not pretend that in 1 or 2 years, with the right types of TV shows, we can just rewire everybody's brain completely.
I actually made a video about that. As a matter of fact, I staged someone at some point, and this person was talking about how they're not making things harder on men when they're being picky. And I wanted to elaborate on that in the dating scene, especially how, yes, women technically in quantity have more options, compared to men. But you're not looking at these options. You're not looking at what quality these options are. You're looking at it like on a very base level of quantity. A woman can go into a bar and like pull 10 men. Okay, like what the fuck are those 10 men? Who are those 10 men? How many of them are abusers? How many of them are extremely fucking traumatized that never seeked help in their lives? How many of them can cook and clean and fucking wash their asses? You would be surprised. Further, Eli Monty's point, you would be surprised with how many horror stories about how shitty and how incompetent men are that I see on a daily basis every single day, on a daily basis on my fucking comment sections.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised about
that's
that,
why
but
we're
just
here,
real quick,
right?
like, I wouldn't be surprised about that at all. But the issue is that, like, as women have stepped into more traditionally masculine roles in society, which is awesome, no woman wants a man that stepped into a traditionally feminine role in society. So, for instance, today we see that women are going to school, graduating, and earning more money. But if you would have a man that was stepping into what a woman did, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, where he's like, hey, I'm decently attractive, I'm young, and I can take care of a house really well, any working woman, or most of them, would look at that man and go, that guy's a fucking loser. I'm not going to date that guy. I don't want a house husband.
I disagree.
Based on what?
It can be
Yeah,
based on the
and
two
again,
studies
like-
I linked. If you really have no personal experience whatsoever with this, I mean, you can go to the two studies that I've linked. You can look at a
No,
plethora
I
of
actually,
dating.
I honestly think like this is
Not
the
only
kind of
that-
thing
That's why
that
I'm
you could just
surprised.
go
Okay, hold
outside
up.
and
Okay, we're gonna go to Cam, and then we'll go to Meat.
No, I actually I have no idea. I didn't see the research that you sent. I will check it. I promise I will. But at the same time, to
One's just
your
an
research,
abstract. You can read it really quickly. So one's just an abstract. You can read it really quickly. Sorry, keep it.
But
Okay.
also-
you continue. I'm gonna read this real quick.
Okay.
But also, I would say, like, and again, this is speaking from like personal, I guess it's speaking from personal experience, so you can write me off as anecdotal if you want to, but I would say that there are actually quite a few women out there that are probably like, yeah, I'd be open if he was like, wanting to take more of a house husband sort of role or what have you. I don't think it's as polarizing as you might think it is. I guess I would say that on average, maybe there are more women that would probably say no to that, but I don't think it's like absolutely like no woman would be like, oh no, I don't want to deal with this peasant that wants to just
I
exist
mean,
in
it
a
like
house
I don't know how else to
with
say it, but
a
like
job.
this is the issue with the disconnect between left and right. That is the case. Like I don't know how else to say it. Like even if we look at like super like I remember Tommy Lauren did this video that I got so frustrated with a few years ago, and like she's talking about like, oh yeah, like I'm earning more. I want a guy that's not a loser. I need a guy that earns a lot of money. Like you can find this. You can Google like women date up economically, and you could find like study after study after study that shows that even as women are earning more money, they do not want to date somebody that's less financially well off than them. That's just like if you can't even acknowledge that. I mean, or I'm not trying to make it personal. I don't mean it, but I'm like that is something that is played out time and time again, and it's like super ubiquitous throughout all of society.
Okay. So we're basing our assumptions on the study that says more than 1 in 5 women, 22% say they wouldn't date someone who makes less money than them. That's where we're basing our assumptions, right?
Because we're basing
Sure,
it
that's
off
one
of
of it.
averages. Like there's more than one. I linked another
No,
one
because
about like unpartnered adults. So
I would love
Sorry.
to
Even
love to
if we're-
see that one as well. But this survey is done asked to 3,000 single women who about their preferences. I'll just if we're basing our arguments on the amount of people who answered in one way or the other in surveys, I'll just tell you I have right now on TikTok 300,000 followers. 91% of that is in binary senses, because TikTok doesn't have other genders, but in binary senses, AFAB or identifying as female. That is 270,000 people following me and contributing on my comments, saying exactly the opposite of whatever the shit this research is saying. If we're basing our assumptions on 3,000 people, I'll give you
So real quick. So
I've-
one, you mentioned sociology earlier. So if you want to allude to social sciences, we can do that. Surveys are going to be done in a way more controlled manner than here's everybody that tends to follow one ideologically leaning channel, right? I imagine if you do far left leaning content, I super don't care about what your community would say. Much as I wouldn't care about what my community would say. It's going to be super biased. So a study is going to be more valid. Number one.
Sure.
Yeah. Number two, like these data points can be repeated time and time again across multiple countries. It's not even like people don't do these surveys and they're like, oh my God, women are only dating men that are more financially successful than them. That's why. It's not like we're getting these huge like disapprovals of the nulls. It's like, oh my God, it's pretty expected, and I think it's like pretty common throughout almost all of modern
Yeah,
day
but
and
what,
past
why
society.
is it expected? That's what I'm saying. Why is it expected?
I think it's probably expected because biologically, the way that we're wired, women probably tend to want figures that can take care of them, and men tend to want people that are young and hot. That seems to be biologically it seems to be a thing. And then how that is like echoed throughout society, like we can change a lot of that. For instance, women are working more, which is cool, but we have to be able to contend with those baser forces if we're going to have an honest conversation about what people want. Because here's something that I would go forth to say, and you might get upset, you might be wrong. I guarantee you that the vast majority of women in your comment sections that are saying shit like that would absolutely go for a 30 or 35-year-old dude if he was super financially successful and decently mature. Guaranteed. Even if they would say otherwise, oh, I only date my own age, or I don't think I look for that thing. Like time and time again, you'll see it play out differently where somebody will state a thing, but that's like given the opportunity to choose, that's not what they go for.
So I'm just going to pause us all. I'm just going to
It's
pause us all.
biological.
Eli, I'm just going to pause us all. So when it comes to data and stuff, I'm a big snob about this stuff. So if you guys would like to counter the factual data that they're outlining, we'll just need another study. We can't use personal anecdote or anything beyond that. We can absolutely tear apart the studies if you would like to do so, but we can't just treat this. We're not going to do any like dismissal of data points. Just to be clear, I'm not saying anyone is. I just want to like have that assumed going forward.
No, that is 100% fair. And even in that case, again, I didn't read the entire thing. I just read the synopsis, the first paragraph. We are looking at 3,000 single women who answered the survey, and only 22% said they wouldn't date down. Now, what you're saying, Destiny,
Compared
is
to men, that's the thing.
Yeah,
it's not it's not in a vacuum. It's saying like, yes, 1 in 5 doesn't seem that big, but compared to 1 in 20, it absolutely is.
No,
Like,
but
I
what
also
I'm
wanted to
talking
say-
about right now is not comparing
there's-
to what I'm talking about right now is like in general what women prefer. If you want to compare it to men, yeah, obviously men don't care about, a lot of men don't care about the financial stability that women bring, because once again, that is not how the society is conditioned. That is not the norms that we live in.
But this is
Let's
what
say,
this is
I
what I
don't
mean
think-
when I talk about.
I
This
think
is what I'm getting.
Sorry, 1 second. So this is like actually important. Like I really like encourage everyone like to look at like this Pew stuff that I just like linked like to the group. So there's some really interesting things about unpartnered men versus unpartnered women and partnered men and partnered women and how they relate financially. So this is from Pew about from adults age 25 to 54, right? So if you look at say men in relationships versus men who aren't in relationships, employed men are like 91% likely to be employed versus unpartnered men are only 73% likely to be employed. The opposite is true for women, although to like a smaller degree. In the same way, in terms of financially vulnerable, there's more financially vulnerable single men, but like women finding a partner, the financial vulnerability of women is like the same versus partnered versus unpartnered. So maybe you could say like do like a flip reverse on me and say, oh, it's because women are like so financially like fucked that like they whether they're in a relationship or not, they're like financially vulnerable. But what that seems to me, and like feel free to disprove that, is that women, even if they're financially vulnerable, have less problems finding a partner compared to men. And men who are more employed have a greater chance of finding a partner in the same way that men having a bachelor's degree, hence being like more employable, also have a higher chance of being partnered. So like there's all these like signifiers of status or wealth or stability that just seem to show that men need these more so than women to be able to have these relationships, and it isn't affecting women in the same way. Because otherwise, why
I just
would
want to go back to
sorry? So yeah, the only thing is like why would unemployed women be more likely to be or like be very likely to be partnered than men, right? Or why would say financially vulnerable men struggle more to find a partner than a man who isn't financially vulnerable, right? So like there's like it's pretty clear, especially when women can have the same sort of financial vulnerabilities but like have no problems finding a partner. It's just like it's because it seems on average, again, this isn't every person, and I'm sure every person in like Cam's like fucking chat is super based and like they all like love poor guys, right? Like we're all based fellow like proletariat members, but on average women seem to like select for certain things and men seem to select for certain things as well, and we have to acknowledge that if we're going to tear down the patriarchy that everyone agrees is a problem, right?
No, I agree
And
with
even
that.
if it's not, even if it's not one to one,
real quick, Pete, give me 1 second.
I've been waiting a while. Could I get in here just for a sec? Because I've
We're
been
gonna
trying
do
to.
meat and then we'll do
I call
Monty.
next. Yeah,
Okay, I'll just yeah, that's fine. I appreciate it. I'll just say real quick, like I think that like even when we're talking about money, and maybe this will help bridge your descriptive reality with what we're talking about, which is that like even if like it's not necessarily this holistic determinant thing about money, I think that like that 22% that is leaning towards on average towards like what women are preferring over men. Oh, I don't think he even hears me. That that 22% is indicative of some underlying truth, because even like when of competency or reliability or ability to provide or stability or something like that, because when even when we're looking at like the younger generations, like we've already talked about, like where women are starting to out earn or are starting to earn more. I think in some by some measures they're maybe starting to out earn men on average, or looking like they might because they're becoming more educated. Even then, I think like there's a descriptive reality we all share where we could go out and like even when like where you could ask these younger generations, and even the women who are open to dating someone who makes less than them, I think they would still, like, you could just go out and ask like 10, 20 random women and you would still get a lot of answers, even if you controlled for those women that would just be like, hey, you know, even if I'm open to dating a man who makes less money than me, I still don't want to date, like, there's a loser archetype. There's someone who's like not doing anything with their life, who's not achieving anything, who's just piddling around, who doesn't care about anything, like
Two sentences?
who isn't who basically isn't substantiating anything from the life in that way that fits the archetype without it necessarily just being about making more.
So a couple things. First off, I wanted to go back to what Destiny said, where and maybe this might have been a misspeak, where he said that it's like biological. I would have to disagree. I think in many cases, these are things that are you know, they're norms. They're societal norms. They're things we have been taught. We have been conditioned. I don't necessarily think it's a biological thing. I think it's just something that we, especially over here in Western society, because from what someone in my chat said, actually more Eastern societies tend to be, especially like in Asian, what have you, and this person might be wrong, I don't know, tend to be more matriarchal. But these are things that we have been conditioned over here in Western society to believe. Not only that, but are we ever gonna address the MILFs in the room? You know what I mean? Like we said earlier, this might be me going back farther, Erudite. This might be me going back a little bit too far. But I mean, when we talk about, you know, older women, men not liking older women, there's an entire porn category that is like fetishized over,
And all
called
those women
MILF.
are like
As a
late
matter of fact,
20s. You are a MILF as soon as you aren't a teenager anymore.
Hold
Like,
on.
what are
Have
you
you seen
saying?
some of that? Not only that, but also like, sorry, not only that, but when we talk, going back to the prompt, right, the original prompt of how are men failing in relationships, just because a man goes to a bar and he's, you know, financially stable and mature and stuff like that, or he presents that way, doesn't necessarily mean that that man is going to be successful in a relationship. He might be able to pull a few, maybe. He might be able to get a couple numbers, maybe. But then we get into, you know,
You can't
the actual
score unless you get on
relationship
base
part.
first, and that's the thing that you just talked about. Like they pull more, and the more they pull, the greater chance of them actually getting a relationship. If you don't score, if you don't get on bench at all, then you're just not going to do it. And like that's
Also,
that's the
just
difference.
real quick on this. So the idea that
like,
Just
when we
wait,
go
just
back
wait.
to what we're talking
Eli,
about
let's let Destiny in. You've had about 2 minutes of talking time straight, so.
just quickly responding to that. Eastern societies aren't matriarchal. I don't know who said that. You can go to any of these countries and the
Like
gender roles
Chinese foot binding of women. Like
yeah. The Eastern societies are not matriarchal. I don't know who said that.
Listen, I just said.
No, I understand that whatever chatter said that dude's on some massive copium. Number one. Number two, I think the MILF porn category is probably one of the strongest arguments that I could make, and that MILFs are people that are like 24 and older. Okay?
Yeah.
When you go to these porn sites, a MILF is somebody that is like, this girl will say she's like 19 and she looks like she's 22 and she's actually like 25. Okay? Like the age expectations of all of that are super fucked. And then number three, in terms of like, there's no difference in biology. I mean, like, women can comfortably have children up to about 35, right? And then men can do it into their 60s or 70s. I don't know if there's ever a point. I mean, at some point you run into like sperm motility issues, but like there are reasons why we could imagine biologically women are wired to get on the baby train a little bit sooner than men might be wired to, because men can afford to wait a lot longer than women can.
I mean,
How was that
maybe.
biology?
Hold on,
I
wait.
would-
What part of that is a
Wait,
maybe?
It's
Well,
not a
then we
maybe
get
because like
into-
here's
Well, I want to know what part of that is a maybe.
Wait, no. The reason why I said maybe is because, like, I think biology only takes us so far. Then
Of
we
course.
implement, you know, the fact that we implement like humanity, and the fact that like there is this level of, I guess, rationale and like understanding that separates us from the animals, it allows us to I guess traverse, or I don't want to necessarily say transcend, but for lack of a better word, surmount, I guess, the biology and think like, oh, you know, examine other factors that come into play, such as maturity and other.
I mean, we can never escape biology. It's always going to be a reality, right? Like we can try to do things to like kind of get around it, but it's always going to be there, right?
I mean, it'll be there, but again, like
no, but Monty, it really does matter. Monty, here's a really good example, right? So we're talking about like the fertility thing, right? So me and a person I'm seeing, we're both 24, right? So like I have a pretty good career right now. They're like in grad school, right? If we don't want to talk about fertility stuff, like treatments that they might have to do, they have like 10 years, like which is also the start of their career to have children. Either they have to forgo having children and like either do it like in their 30s and hope that like the fertility doesn't go away, or they have to have kids now, and it gives them a roadblock because it means they can't have the sacrifices, or one of us is going to have to like have sacrifices in terms of like our, say, career stability or our career advancement. So this isn't, say, like, there's not biology is like the end all be all, but biology is directly impacting how society is operating, because all human beings, at least like in America right now, right, and most like
I'd say Western, right?
Right. No,
I'm just saying
you
can only take it so far.
Obama.
No, but it takes us so far, because imagine, like, say you want to me and my partner, we're both 24, we want to have 3 kids, right? We have to get 3 kids by the time they're like 35, and if they're trying to say like either become like a physical therapist or a doctor or something, like when they finish their grad school, they have to do that while having 3 kids and starting their career. While I can probably just keep doing the career that I'm already on, or one of us will have to make the sacrifice to stay home with the children, or in the very least, I won't have any like say things stopping me while they're pregnant. If they have 3 pregnancies to get through, that's let's say like almost like 2 years where they are less capable of like doing like of making the sacrifices or doing like strenuous things at work or being on the clock. Sorry. So you're saying like we can transcend them, but like they are so real in how it can affect society that like it's not biological essentialism to say that. And like we have to like contend with that. Otherwise we're never gonna like fix any of these problems.
Wouldn't say that it's biological essentialism to say that. I would say that it's biological essentialism to focus so heavily on it. We can acknowledge that, and I think we all do acknowledge those things, but what I'm saying is that they only take us so far. And again, I want to bring us back to the prompt. I think the original topic that we came here to discuss is what are the ways in which men are failing in...
Uh-oh.
I think he's died. So we'll maybe move on. Is everyone broadly willing to agree that there are some level of biological differences between the 2 groups that are going to inform some level of psychological mate selection? I think most people are on board with that, correct?
I mean, on paper, yes, but at the same time, that also brings me back to the point that I made. A lot of these things that we are looking at are based on patriarchy. If women don't need men for financial security, then entirety of your argument falls apart, because then women are not, like, hypothetically, then women should not be even dating men. The women who have financial security, if men are not providing financial security, they suck at emotional security or like emotional whatever comfort. They don't do any fucking domestic chores or shit. As you guys said, they're losers. Then why the fuck should women date men?
Doing chores isn't the loser archetype, to be clear. These are different things.
I might have misunderstood.
It's if you can only do chores, right? Like there aren't all these 20-year-old house husbands that everybody is desiring.
Husband arc. Let's
go. It's like people want. I guess this always like is interesting to me when people get, especially intersectional people, when they get very weird on this, like there are no biological differences. Do we think that, for instance, once patriarchy is eliminated, do we think there's going to be that the pressure or the issue between men raping women and women raping men, do we expect that to equalize ever, or is that always going to favor men in terms of power?
What do you think the process of eliminating patriarchy looks like?
Whatever you think it is, we can both imagine.
So because like systems of power are not going to be eliminated as long as there are oppressors and there are oppressed. So if
theoretically, if we could wave a wand,
if you can wave a wand, then you would be eliminating everything that makes patriarchy exist in order to eliminate patriarchy to begin with, and that power, struggle between men and women, whether it comes to I guess physical strength or rape or whatever you're talking about, domestic violence, all those things need to be eliminated in order.
Sure, but then you've just pointed out how the only way to do that in this case, for example, is to equalize men and women biologically, which is not the world we live in, right? That's sort of the problem.
That's what we said.
Or even more importantly, it sounds like you're saying that patriarchy does indeed then come from biology. It is a biological thing.
Right.
No, but you don't understand what I'm putting through. Do you think people in fucking hunter-gatherer, that's why I brought that up. Do you think people in hunter-gatherer societies had those biological differences today? Like,
In most
first
of
of
those
all,
studies, absolutely
Yeah.
yes, of course.
first of all, when we are talking about biological differences, we are not talking about, a biological difference in the, size and strength between, like, I don't know, an elephant and a fucking mice. Women might be biologically slightly, less strong than men, sure, whatever, but we are living in
That's still a
2022.
difference. Oh god.
No,
So
but
we're-
that
It's a
can be a
meaningful
difference.
difference.
That's
It's a
not
Hold
meaningful
a
on. So I'm just
Stop
going to say
cutting
this
people
right
off.
now it is 1v3. So I just want to make sure that when Cam is talking, that we're letting him speak. Yeah.
It is not a meaningful difference in 2022. If you eliminate, like, by educating men or by, I don't know, whatever the fuck do you want to do, because there's always this question to the left, okay, how do you want to solve this? Let me ask center, how do you want to do this? Because all I'm hearing is like, oh, this is inevitable, this is going to happen, then how do you want to solve this? Because this is not a meaningful difference. We are living in 2022. Nobody's hunting. Nobody's using fucking spears. If you want to fucking lift heavy things, you can lift heavy things with, like, fucking, aid with tools and machinery. That is not a meaningful difference. Only so far it is a meaningful difference when it comes to, protecting yourself, in which case we have weapons like fucking guns, arm up, I guess. But at the same time, you teach men not to fucking harm women. You don't need to worry about that fucking difference to begin with. So the answer is, or should be, in my opinion at least, you might have different opinions, is to, like, raise your sons not to be fucking rapists.
So like the thing that we were asking is that you're correct for some of that. So like the big thing is that in the majority of scenarios, you're right, physical strength no longer really fucking matters. You don't have to be like a giant jack dude to like sit at a fucking cubicle all day at all. But in certain instances, in this case, say like physical altercations or rapes, right? You can probably say that a person or a group of people that are physically on average say like 50% stronger than another group, if all other things being equal, there's probably going to be at the very least more successful perpetrators of rape from men. Everything else being equal. Because when you say like, oh, like we have like technology now, people have guns. Okay, but like, is every situation, like, is every woman going to be packing? Is every woman gonna like start like being like crazy strong in the gym and stuff now? Because like, let's say like take Destiny for example, right? He's like he exercises like semi regularly. He's like an average sized guy. He could probably physically overpower the majority of women, right?
Okay, but then you're still saying Destiny is someone who exercises. Women who exercise can match in power to average men as well.
Very
But
few.
when-
I am stronger than like 99.999% of women on this planet, unless they're like taking roids and like they're like a top tier athlete. They're not overpowering me, and the vast majority of them are not overpowering me.
in either cases, what you're doing right now is, and I don't think you're doing this intentionally, but if you present the argument that, okay, men are stronger than women, that is going to cause like rape to happen, then you're invalidating the experiences of men who are raped by women. Now you're invalidating them as like, okay, you're lesser man, or like you're not man or something.
No, okay, wait. So
6'3", 250
real
pounds,
quick.
and I was like,
No,
reckoned,
okay,
okay,
hold on.
it
So
doesn't happen like that.
real quick.
Brother,
Nobody's invalidating anybody's experiences. Okay, people can have negative experiences for a wide variety of reasons. Okay, we have to be careful not to play like linguistic traps to say that like you can't point this out because by pointing this out you've offended a whole class of people. The reality is that on average, the average man, given the opportunity to, could tear apart 95% of women in society. The average man could. That is a power differential that exists that has to be acknowledged when we talk about things like dating dynamics. There's a reason why we give different advice to men and women when it comes to dating, and it's not just because of patriarchy, and it's not just because of society. It's because on average, if you're a man, you don't usually have to be worried that a woman is going to be able to overpower you and rape you. Where if you're a woman, that is the case. You have to worry about that. So this is like one example where there is an actual descriptively difference between the biology of like a man and a woman, where you have to keep these things in mind when we talk about what we should do as a society. And from there, we can extrapolate a whole bunch of other things too. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, in that case, you all agree when I say, teach your sons not to fucking rape.
No, I think everybody here.
Well,
Or wait, hold on. Were there any
sure,
pro-rape people on this panel? Let me just check.
No.
Anybody? Okay, saying that we should teach people
Only
not
if my
to rape.
sons do it.
That's like saying that I'm gonna leave my car unlocked in the parking lot every single night, and hopefully everybody taught their people not to steal. It doesn't make any sense. We have to take the world as it is. It would be cool if there were no rapist men, and that would be great. And we should tell people not to rape, but there's still gonna be rapists in society. You're never gonna have a society with 0% rape. That's not gonna happen. Not to mention the fact that a lot of rape isn't like people going out and raping people. It's people having very poor understandings of consent or poor understandings of like situations that end up like raping for a variety of reasons as well. So that idea of like just tell people not to rape, I think is a really simplistic way to view those types of transactions between men and women.
I didn't say just tell people not to rape. I said raise your fucking sons properly.
But
how does that help us?
Properly. Like,
We don't-
No,
even if-
like,
That doesn't.
Even in communicating to your sons
what do you
that
mean?
message, it still might be important to like the part of the things, the part of explaining that to them and why you need to have this conversation with them in some way. Like part of that might be recognizing the descriptive reality of like why you need to have a particular conversation, like why men exist in a unique way in this sphere, right? Like I think women would generally like. I think if you asked women if in 2022 there was some meaningful difference in like that power dynamic out there in the world, I think like. I don't know. I think they would like unanimously agree that there is a meaningful difference. You know what I mean?
In that case, let me roll back to something Destiny just said. Some of these rape cases happen because of misunderstandings or like people who are not taught consent and everything. Now, I grew up until 19 years old in Turkey. That's where I'm from, right? So I don't know how it is in United States or where you guys are. So tell me any differences that exist. But we had sex education in, I think it was high school. I was never taught of consent in school and sex education. Is that the same with you guys?
We get taught, but like
sex education.
The way they teach consent is very, very, very not primeval, very primitive, very primitive. We don't learn very much.
It's like don't rape people in college. If you see someone who's drunk, don't rape them if they're asleep. Don't do that. Like it's very like they're not like good conversations.
But like they don't go into detail what informed consent is. They don't go into detail what like enthusiastic consent.
No, Cam. If I grant you everything you're saying, the difference is we teach every person. If every person on the planet, like male, female, non-binary, MB, intersex, whatever, every person is like 10 years of like non-rape training, right? The idea is if there's some members of the population, like male or female or whatever, like extra, right, are raping people. If there's a biological difference that improves someone's chances in a physical altercation, would we be comfortable saying that like one group is most likely going to have more successful instances of that? And I say successful like as in like they succeeded in raping, not that it's a good thing to rape. That's what we're asking you. Is that if we like do all these things, like you're saying, we teach men how to be right, we teach women how to be strong, right? And everything's a baseline now. We have all the respectful women. The only people who aren't are fucking crazy and they just want to rape people, right? How many of the just crazy people who are men are going to be more successful than the just crazy people who are women? That's the question.
Awesome. I'm going to pause you guys for 2 seconds. Eli's having a really bad storm, so aristocracy has stepped in to kind of fill his role. If Eli is able to get his power back, he will also join us, and we'll just have a slightly larger panel. But just so that everyone knows, this is aristocracy. Probably most of you have met her. I don't think Cam has yet, though. So now you guys know each other. Okay. Sorry. Not to Hans. Can you restate like really quickly the last couple of points that you just made so we can pick up from there?
So basically, it just if we teach everyone in society like mega ultra super like how to not rape people, and there's a small percentage of people who are still going to rape people, and they're both men and women, the physical difference of men being slightly strong, that being considerably stronger than women, normally means that like men are going to be more successful at raping women, based on like there just being that physical power dynamic differential. That's like the thing. You could say that women might like sexually assault men in other ways, but in the case of just the physical conversation, men have an advantage physically.
So in this case, okay, let me agree on what you're saying on the basis that sure, men who are stronger, who are fucking psychotic, who didn't give a fuck about 10 years of education on consent on not to rape people, are still
and women. We have raping women as
and
well.
women.
Women can be rapists too, all right?
They can be, and women, but
Feminism.
we are talking about how men are stronger and more successful at raping people, right? So I'm basing it on men. But in this scenario, we are using strength as something that is used by one gender to perpetuate something negative to the other gender. We are not looking at it as like a positive thing between in the dating scene between two genders.
None of these things are being
Same.
looked at as positive or negative. They're just realities that
Descriptive, not
exist. Yeah,
prescriptive.
they're just realities that we have to
Exactly.
like keep in mind. That's all I'm trying to say. Because when we start losing tabs of like what is actually happening, then we start making weird statements like men and women's power difference isn't that big. Which, well, now we've gotten into now how do we talk about like sports, or how do we talk about like dating? Like now we've gotten into really weird areas where we're kind of erasing other important conversations that we need to be having because we're not acknowledging like what's actually going on.
No, the reason I ask is because like the entire conversation about like rape started with like biological differences between men and women, and I said the strength difference is not meaningful when it comes to dating.
Sure, but I think the strength difference is a little bit meaningful when it comes to hookup interactions, which is arguably the lead into dating. Like,
But these things in general change based on time period and stuff.
no, they
Like,
don't.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you that like biology often plays a role, but how biology plays a role depends on what are the current needs of that society and everything.
I don't think that's true. I don't know why people keep saying that. You don't have societies where women were out there like waging war, or where they were doing like heavy lifting, or where men were bearing children. Like this is not true, right? For the most part, like our gender roles and our sexualities have been pretty static throughout our 10,000 years of human history, recorded human history.
Yeah, but gender roles, I agree with you, but gender roles do not equal patriarchy necessarily, right?
Well, that seems to be the case that's generally how it plays out for a variety of reasons, but not that that's a good thing. I'll say that every time. I don't think it's a good thing. It just is a thing.
Yeah, even in societies that were super matriarchal or had other systems of power, like where the elders were really dominant, women still primarily were the caregivers of children and men hunted and all of that kind of stuff. But they still had a different demonstration of how they showed power and who was dominant. So, like, even though I agree there can be like certain individual like similarities probably have some biological inferences, how it shows in the details of that society can be very, very different. So I think it's like you don't want to just be like super simplistic, just be like, well, it's biology and that's why like all
Yeah,
the
I
things
agree, but
all
we
the
can't
things are the
even
same.
you can't even get to that conversation because people won't even acknowledge that in the beginning. Like because we haven't even started to talk about anything interesting yet here. We're at the area of like, can we please acknowledge some level of reality? Because the interesting conversation afterwards is, okay, given this set of biological realities, what can we do to socially engineer ourselves to be a certain way, right? So like, one biological reality might lead to a world where no woman ever works because they're all constantly pregnant and just giving birth to children. That reality sucks, okay? And I think at least in liberal society, we would aspire to something better than that. And I think we have. I think we've done a lot better there. So that's cool. So in some ways, our biology isn't the most important thing, right? There are women that are stronger than men through a lot of training. There are men that are caregivers in households, which is probably not normal, historically speaking. So we can do it. But I'm just saying that like we're going to have these conversations about how to socially engineer people to do certain things. We have to start from a shared understanding of biologically what is true. Because when you run around saying things, that one guy, he's not here anymore, but saying things to be like, oh, like just be yourself and like people will like you or whatever. When you start filling people's heads with stuff like that, and then they go on into actual dating markets and now everything is failing, nothing is working. Women are doing things that a lot of men don't give a fuck about. Men are doing things that a lot of women don't give a fuck about. Now everybody's like super confused and nobody knows like where the ground even is because nobody's giving anybody an honest account of what's actually happening.
I agree. I think like a lot of like your issues are just like with I guess like the pop culture of the pop dating culture that we see. But I don't actually like see a lot of that stuff, I guess, in day to day. And it's hard to say like again because there's so many of these things. I was talking about this in Erudite's chat. Like so many of these things are dependent on subcultures and are so subjective. I really think the primary thing that attracts both men and women is social status. And what depends on that social status is like very, very different depending on on the subculture. And one subculture it might be like getting on the basketball team like when you're in high school, and another subculture it might be earning a ton of money, etc. Like I think, and especially when people think that women are primarily focused on especially like successful women, primarily focused on only dating guys that are earning more money than them. That's actually, I wouldn't actually say that's the case. It's usually they want a man that has either equal or higher social standing, like social status. So if they were like say successful in business, they wouldn't mind dating a guy who wasn't earning as much, but if he's a famous politician and's got super high social cred, right, and gets invited to the fancy balls, she probably wouldn't give a shit.
That might be
Right.
true, but you're talking about social statuses in the United States, at least, and probably most
Very
of the,
linked
most,
to money.
Yeah, it's almost inexorably going to be linked to money. There's very few examples that we can think of people of very high social status who are going to have like very little money. Like that's just doesn't tend to be the case, right?
I guess.
I would also
guess if
argue
you're
that-
comparing like very like large inequities from like very very poor people to very very rich people. But say if like we're just looking at like a smaller pool of just upper middle class, I don't think you start getting significant like diminishing returns.
Okay,
there,
but,
and stops
but
being as significant.
for Eris, like specifically, but you talked about like say like status, right? So let's talk like let's like briefly like break down what at least like in say like American, Canadian like society is like attributed with status for both like men and women, right? For women, it's like about being like extremely physically attractive. It's like about like demonstrating youth, and recently, which is really cool, it's about being successful. It's about being wealthy. It's about being powerful, right? For men, it's much less like they'll be like eye candy, but like being super attractive as a dude is not nearly like the same sort of like standing in society or gives you the status as women. There aren't say like, you know, a unemployed
agree.
like
But
like
that depends.
like model, right? Like no, but what I'm saying is like sure it depends, but on average, right? So if we're talking about like the status, like the way that men and women right now in society, I'm not saying this is good, Cam. I'm saying that this is what happens is that the way they achieve status is different. And so if we want to try and level that field, we have to say, you know, make it more okay for men to be attractive himbo house husbands, but and like also make it like, and we're currently working on like allowing women to be super successful like Giga Chad investors. But even if you look like say like successful women right now, right? A lot of successful women right now, they still like play like the being attractive game, whether it's like, you know, a high powered like CEO or whether it's like, you know, like aging actresses. Like there's the joke about like in Hollywood how like actresses kind of like just disappear when they're like when they turn like 40.
But how that gets demonstrated is very different in different societies, right? And in different even in different subcultures. Like I've existed in multiple different subcultures just in growing up in Canada, and the way and what's considered attractive both in men and women is insanely different. Like what's considered attractive and like as like in an Orthodox Jewish man is like being super super educated, and being really knowledgeable on your Bible, and maybe being the son of a rabbi. Like that's like obviously, and a lot of these things like are just they change like based on different subcultures. I think like when we're giving people advice, if we're talking about like overall government policy, which I feel like we're not, then looking at averages is useful. But if we're talking about like advice and just like giving average advice to individuals, then saying like, yeah, you got to look at your subculture and what's achievable and what's looked at as attractive. For example, so the idea of like a trophy wife. When people have this image of a trophy wife, I don't think that in very, very wealthy circles, that I've seen like in the United States and in Canada, in those wealthy circles, like the old idea of a trophy wife just is not a trophy wife at all. Like that doesn't exist anymore. Trophy wives still exist, but they're different. So now a trophy wife is supposed to be super educated. In fact, like the more degrees that trophy wife has, the more of a trophy she has, she still should be really attractive, but she's usually expected to be a little bit older. Like there are just different it's changed, right? And these things like change like dependent, and I'm sure in I don't know, like in like a celebrity community in LA, a trophy wife is different than that. So it's just like these things are just so dependent on and so subjective. But the most common thing that I just see is social status.
I think that it's really we have to like get off this whole like in some rare cases like this thing will happen because it's so destructive to. I don't like it how leftists are so keen to talk about individual examples or get into like the nuance of things when it suits them, but then when it doesn't, they'll just like speak with broad strokes or they'll do these other things like. There are so many like broad generalizations I'll see of like men in general or whatever, and men do this, or this is a thing we have to worry about in dating culture, blah, blah. Like people will make statements like this all the time, and then when it comes to like, oh well, what do women prefer in dating? Well, in some very rare ultra orthodox Jewish communities, I know there are going to be things like who the fuck cares? Like this is like we're talking like a 1% of a 1% of a 1%, and even a lot of the things that you're bringing up, like for instance, well, men are expected to be very educated. Well, what does that mean? They're probably not with like gender studies degrees, right? That's my guess. It's probably going to be educated in fields that are traditionally making pretty decent money or being professors that are making pretty decent money. It's not going to be like this guy is like super educated in liberal art. So you okay?
And-
Not, like,
Anyways,
primarily-
you're bringing up the group of people that make more money than literally any other fucking group in the entire world. Like, why would you like?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm talking about, because I was talking about Orthodox Jews, because there's a difference of what's considered attractive versus with Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews, right? And
sure,
that's just,
and I'm
like,
sure
the
there
one
are some
micro-
differences, but for the most part, this is going to track like 98% of the time throughout society, probably even in these subcultures.
Sure,
There might
but
be
it seems
some
like your
varying differences,
frustration
but
doesn't. It seems like your frustration is, first of all, I'm not a leftist, right? So if you're bringing up criticisms for leftists, I usually will agree with you. So I feel like it's kind of, sometimes I think, like, especially like in with the comments that you just said, it seems like those positions are somewhat like reactionary to those leftists rather than like, you know, the positions themselves that you would normally just subscribe to. It seems like you're very frustrated with how lefties or like pop liberal culture talks about these things.
yeah,
And like
well, I'm
and
frustrated
them
because it's
to-
wrong, but it's
which is-
but my views aren't.
which I think is valid.
But my views
Eric.
aren't reactionary. My views are that if I'm going to talk to an audience, right, I'm not going to sit here because reactionary would be me saying like, oh, your personality doesn't matter at all. Oh, if you're a man, all you need to do is make a lot of money, beat the shit out of women, giga chad, you'll be fine. Oh, if you're a woman, older than 24, better kill yourself. No chance for you, right? I'm not saying
But
shit
that'd be
like
if
that.
you're dumb.
No, that would be reactionary. What I'm saying is reality. This is the reality of the world we live in. Don't opine for some subculture that you don't even know where these people exist. But like, here's the reality as it is. If you want to be successful in these types of dating markets, right? You basically the only people you could list to right now are red pillars because people on the left are going to come at you with this. Oh, well, just be yourself, and like lots of people prefer different things. Well, thanks, chief. That doesn't help me with anything, right? Like that piece of advice is meaningless. It's feel good, over
Literally,
compassionate
no
stuff.
one on the left says that.
I agree that advice. Like I agree with all your criticisms. Like of there, it's like totally valid. It's just it's the conclusion that you end up coming to.
Wait,
that
what is
seems
the
like
conclusion
somewhat
that I've come
strange.
to that you think is incorrect or reactionary?
I wouldn't say necessarily incorrect, but like this blanket statement that this is just like always what is attractive, and that's always
Because it
what
has been.
men do. But
Harris,
that's not necessarily true.
It
Harris,
absolutely is true. In almost all of societies, men are typically valued for their accomplishments and women are typically valued for their age. That's shitty. I think that's a shitty thing. But like through 10,000 years of human history, more or less, that's always been the case. So if we want to break that mold, we can, but you have to start by recognizing that fact.
I just don't find it super
what I do.
useful. Like when we're talking about like giving advice to people, right? Like Eris, like I'm sure like you know the ins and outs of like inner Jewish dating. I know fucking nothing about that, like whatsoever. And like my fellow anti-Semite Steven, when I give like dating advice, I normally mean like to try, because we talked about pop dating. That's what we're talking about right now. Like talking about like in general, what can men do? Because like again, I live in Virginia, right? Maybe my advice isn't super good for men living in Utah, but there's probably some similarities I can give to a man, regardless of his geographical location inside the United States, that can probably help him with dating. That can probably, in Cam's case, probably help him be less of a rapist and like make him more successful. While like saying, oh yeah, you can be a special snowflake and do whatever you want to do, but just realize that if you're not providing anything of value to women or you're not interested in any particular way, then you probably need to find something like about yourself to change, right? Like you can be a quirky fucking me. Like I have fucking anime posters all over my apartment, but I also like I'm a single guy at 20. Sorry, I'm a guy at 24. I have a 2-bedroom apartment that I pay for by myself. So it's like you're allowed to be quirky, but you also have to like check certain boxes, or at least it makes it easier if you check those boxes. And like everyone like Destiny's chat knows this. Like I'm a fucking schizo poster. Like, but I'm schizo as fuck, and I still like pulled it like decently. So it's like it just depends. Like, but there are still things that like are benchmarks or base marks.
And when you can't agree
I agree.
upon
I
those
guess I'm just.
descriptive
I
realities,
feel like you guys are
people become
overestimating the
resentful.
benchmarks.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. I think on average, like when it comes to like good dating advice, like techniques and stuff are probably like can be really really useful. But I think people need to focus on like who they find attractive and think about who that person would find attractive like in turn and getting to the conclusion of that. But again, like these things are just so different and so dependent on different subcultures that it's like you want to be careful but like from not like just putting like something completely blanket down because it's just not always the case.
I think we're in
so
way.
For this panel, we're going to stick to the questions are relevantly general and broad. So we have to make some general broad claims about society because that's what I've required in the prompt, right? Eris, I will send you those 2 prompts as well, just so you're not.
I don't know the question.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually.
Sorry, one second. I misspoke. I have a partner. Like they're gonna get my ass. Sorry.
You're good.
Sorry.
So I'm going to go back to the two prompts. So we can probably all agree that there are some aggregate differences between the two groups, right? And there's other groups as well, but there's some aggregate differences. What are some fair criticisms and societal expectations for men that they're not meeting? Basically, kind of the question, how are men kind of sucking as partners in a modern dating lens, commonly, right? And how can they improve?
Okay, based on everything we've just said, here's the number one branching point, okay? If you can be a guy who's fucking 25 years old and you have your shit together, you are ahead of 99% of the field. Have a fucking job. If you finish school, that's great. Have an apartment that isn't a fucking mess. Know how to take care of yourself so you can do laundry and do the dishes. You don't even need to know how to cook anymore, okay? It's 2020, but as long as you know how to do the dishes, do laundry, and you are not a fucking lunatic, not some schizo, overly clingy person, not crazy abusive, not crazy fucking weird. It seems like apparently it's a very tall order, but if you can like hit some very basic benchmarks on, could I invite a woman into my life, have a place for her where I am providing some level, I don't even need to like fucking take care of, but you look like you have your shit put together and you're a real life adult, you're going to be ahead of literally 98% of other men in society. You are going to be that far ahead.
Yeah, we can agree on that one, yes.
No disagreements on that? Everyone agrees with those prescriptions?
Yeah, and I guess I don't know. I'll just add. I don't know if it's just filling conversation, but I'll just add that like part of the reason it's so important to be able to agree on that is that like, and it's a weird sort of horseshoe thing where I was saying this is where like the far libs on this issue and like the MGTOW groups on this issue end up coming to similar things where when we start to prescribe it to other sort of weird problems other than that, when we can't agree on the descriptive reality, then when you start prescribing to people, they're going to become resentful because they're going to butt up against that. And I don't know, when we have these, I feel like the breach of expectations of just being able to agree on fair expectations on reality is where a lot of resentment comes from, where you end up in dating, where you end up with like guys who are just like, why don't they just like me for me? Why can't I just like, why do I have to fix all these unfair expectations of me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But one of these like common things that I think is a real challenge like in the dating world is primarily like that where it feels like we're in this in between phase in terms of like broader culture when it comes to gender norms and expectations and all this stuff, where it actually ends up being incredibly unfair in a lot of ways for both parties. And depending on the relationship, it can sometimes really lean towards one party. Like, for example, I know a lot of girls feel very, very frustrated that it feels like in order to be seen as like an ideal mate, they have to look perfect, and the beauty standards are just continuously going up and being crazy. And on top of that, they also have to have degrees, and then they also have to have a job, but they still have to be the primary caregiver, and still have to cook and still have to do all those things. But they also have to look like a cool girl that like eats all the time and all of that kind of stuff, because if it seems like they care too much about their figure, then they'll look like one of those lame feminine girls, but then they still have to have a perfect figure. And that's very frustrating. And then with guys, I mean, we've talked about all the double standards that they often have to feel. So I think it just creates like this really toxic environment. So like I understand like why you have femcells and incels and everything. And yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, I would say like the majority of guys probably this is gonna sound really toxic, but I think the majority of guys probably don't give a fuck if a girl has like a good degree or is like super educated. I don't think that even today, as far as we moved, a lot of guys don't necessarily care about that. I would agree though that there are like really negative stereotypes that end up getting pushed on by both sides, that men and women can like enforce like really shitty stereotypes about each other. But yeah.
I don't know, like anecdotally, for example, like anecdotally, I guess with the types of guys that I was going for on average, they found me more attractive, or they would go for me more often once I got my grad degree. Like even though I was older, like I noticed like I get hit on way more now than I did in my early 20s.
Do you bring up your?
I probably do my hair more.
I have to like. I don't want to attack your anecdotal experience, but I super don't. There's no shot. Like, are you walking to a bar and saying like, "Here's my grad degree," or like, how is this even coming up in like a first conversation with somebody? Like,
just like I don't know,
assume
just
people
like in,
ask like, what do you do?
in
Right?
like just in academic circles and friend circles.
Okay, if
Yeah,
you're
but
like,
you're-
if
but
you're
you're an
specifically like in an
academic dating other
academic
academics.
circle, yeah, then maybe in that like hype. This is why I'm talking about the sub of the sub of the sub. Like in these hyper specific circles, maybe, but like outside broadly, like if you were to hop on like Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, or go to a bar, or like just be in like class with people or have coworkers, I don't think that you having your grad work finished or not finished is like ever going to be the difference between a guy giving you a shot or not. Like that's only going to happen in a hyper specific sub group.
But by that same logic, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, by that same logic, then men's wealth or success doesn't matter either. You need to be good looking, especially if you're on Tinder, unless you're like flaunting, I have this much money, I have this many possessions, then for
True,
someone
but-
to
but-
actually
but-
give
Two
you
hands.
a chance, you need to be a good looking man by that logic. Am I misunderstanding
Or-
you?
Being a
or
good-looking
certain
man
height.
can be important, yeah, for sure. But
Yeah,
men can
yeah,
get
like
away
the-
with looking. There's a wider variety of what's acceptable in society for a decent-looking man, versus women end up getting constrained to this very hyper narrow point of like what is beautiful. That's why like you'll have people like Seth Rogen that even women will say like, oh, like that guy's cute, like, you know, I'd be with that guy, that's
Yeah.
cool, whatever. And you
Seth
never
Rogen
have
is a celebrity.
Exactly. But you'll never have that equivalent for even women's celebrity. Look at how many people make fun of Amy Schumer for her weight,
Yeah.
right? There are plenty of guys that are just as chubby as she is, but they never get made
Yeah.
fun of for their weight in the same way that women do. So there's
Yeah, I
a
agree.
narrower band of like what women are allowed to look like in society versus what men are allowed to look like in society.
And like for Cam, like to defend Cam for a second, like you are correct in that yes, being like super attractive or being like super photogenic is very helpful on dating apps. Like because those like that's the easiest part where people see you, but also you can demonstrate your status in Tinder photos. Like, oh, if you're a guy, like, you know, it's like you know, like crouching on top of a really nice car, right? Or like you're wearing like fancy suits, like at parties like with other fancily dressed people. You can demonstrate your status in society through visual pictures, but like again, it is easier. And if you're a schlubby guy who doesn't know how to take photos, who doesn't have any like interesting shots, because either you're not an asshole who makes your friends like take pictures of you, it is going to be more difficult for you to succeed on visual based platforms. But if you're like going on a date with somebody or you meet somebody in a bar, it's so common. Like what some of the first things that people ask about you, you know, where are you from and what do you do, right? And if someone says, oh, hey, like, you know, I'm an unemployed high school dropout, as opposed to someone says like, oh, you know, I have an MBA and I'm currently working like at a tech startup that's funded by like, you know, like Andrew Yang or something. Like people are probably gonna be like, oh, the second guy's got something going on. They're the same age. Like, and that was in like the span of a first conversation that you got those differences. And so you can say that, yeah, for Tinder, looks matter more because it's like a visual based thing. But like outside of that, you can demonstrate status extremely quickly in conversation. And as a society, we have pushed people towards doing that because you ask, what do you do so often?
But do you see like how all of this stuff is so like dependent on like the subculture and the
No.
platform? And
Well,
all
like
these
going to
things?
bars and Tinder are not dependent on subculture. Those are both very basic things in dating. Like they happen all the time. Like no matter who you are or where you go. Like if you're over 21, you've probably
I
gone to a
think that
bar.
there are a lot of subcultures where it's not the norm to go to like a bar and date, like and to find like a date there or something. Like that's
Would you agree
considered,
that
like, a
most
weird thing to
people
do.
in the population are on probably dating apps, at least? Maybe we'll start with just dating apps. Most people who are looking to date are broadly turning to dating apps. Would everyone agree with that?
I don't know what the
I
numbers
would
are,
say-
so I wouldn't say, but
Like I could comfortably say that over half of people have either gone to a bar or done a dating app if they're over 21 years old. Like 100%. I would stake my life on it.
Even if the particulars of how subgroups express certain things, and I don't even think we necessarily disagree on this, I still think there's some underlying consistencies probably, right? And that's probably what we can address. So like, for example, like, even within like just to use your like I don't know academic or Jewish subgroup like some well-educated Jewish man or something like that, like even within that subgroup, like there's some commonalities here. There's some commonalities of like competence, of stability, of like I don't know, not just being to use lazy language, not being some lazy fuck who's just not doing anything with his life, right? Like there's some kind of commonality here between these things, and like, and sometimes within certain like one example of to appeal to your argument, like one example of a subculture that I've experienced has been like there's a lot of girls out there, a lot of guys don't even realize this. There's a lot of girls out there who like I've heard girls say things like, man, You know, I don't care if a guy's just a total gamer nerd, but if he can rant and rave passionately about those those DPS optimizations, man, I love that shit. And it's not because they give a fuck about DPS optimization, but regardless of whatever heuristic they're using in subcultures that they're attracted to, there's still some underlying commonalities there, right? So, for example, with the gaming analogy would be, I don't know, competence or passion or not being some apathetic fuck or something like that.
Well, there are norms, right? Like, and I'll go back to the Jewish example because that's just my experience. I've never done online dating, so I don't know what that's like. But in the Orthodox Jewish world, in both those worlds, in both the Orthodox Jewish dating world and the wealthy, educated Jewish dating world, right? They're two different, even though they're like similar. In both of those worlds, your age as a woman is important. So Destiny's completely right about that. And I would say probably in most cultures, age is important for women primarily. The thing is that what determines and how that plays out in the details is different. So what is the age that is considered young? So in the Orthodox Jewish world, what's considered too old to get married is 22 to 25, and after 25, it's just like you're basically dead. Okay, in the non-Jewish dating world, that's considered in the non-super religious world, that's considered incredibly young. And if you get married before 30, you're considered like a loser who hasn't accomplished anything. And in the Orthodox Jewish world, it's like totally different. So again, there are these underlying factors where they are important, but how they demonstrate themselves look different. And what that age is, and what that number is, and how attractive someone is, or how they demonstrate that social status, that's what will change.
I'm just not. I'm
Sure.
not really sure. Like, I'm sure like it's really helpful, but again, like I think in regards to general trends, I think meat was. I would say it's more helpful advice like for a person that no matter what you do, right? If you don't want to have to change everything about yourself as a dude, right? Like, so like you only play video games, you only watch anime, you're like the whitest of the white, like you never go outside, but you decide to go outside and like for your first Tinder date ever, being able to speak like competently and passionately about things you actually care about is super sexy. Because if you're just schizoing out the entire time, you're not saying anything interesting, like, oh, like I, like Destiny could say like I go bot and I die again and again and again and again and again and again, and he never talks about like the intricacies of league and teamwork and stuff like that, and like how everyone on his team is terrible. People probably won't like appreciate that conversation the same way. So that is super helpful. But again, like I'm struggling to like about how applicable what you're saying is beyond just saying yes, status is different and it can demonstrate differently across society. But yeah, like you also just said that younger women like are more appreciated in traditional Jewish cultures. Younger women are apparently more appreciated in like general culture as well. So like, I'm just not like sure I'm not sure how beneficial it is to talk about like subcultures if we're trying to give like generalized advice for improving like the dating scene for men, or like giving men advice like on how to date better, like in a way
Yeah,
without being
but
like. Sorry, go ahead, Cam.
subcultures in total create the majority, the general. So I understand what you're trying to say, what you and Destiny are trying to say when you say like let's not focus on one subculture over the other, but subcultures together create the majority.
Yeah, but the majority people tend to prefer certain things, right?
Like you could say more
And there are
people,
commonalities that we could probably agree on.
Yeah.
like more people like do like more people go to bars and say go on dating apps than watch any person on here stream, or even like all of us together, right? So like there's more people that do that than the 300,000 people that like are sub to you on TikTok, or like the 400,000 that are sub to Destiny on like YouTube. Like there's
Also,
we're talking about
moving past like the super gendered stuff. What Professor Mead said is actually true too. Like women like guys that are really interested in something, even if it's like a nerdy thing.
Yeah.
Assuming you've hit like some other bars, right? Like
Yeah,
a certain guy saying something is going to come off
Anime.
differently if he lives with his mom and dad versus like, oh, he's on his own, but he's also into this like geeky hobby. Like and now we can talk about different subsets. There are going to be some women that are always turned off by that. But there's going to be a decent set of women that are like, oh, cool, he's like into something really cool. It's going to depend on like what other criterion you've met as well, right?
How do you feel about there's a common like criticism that I've like heard women say about men is that men don't have hobbies, or men don't have things that they can talk about to women. How would you say that? What would your recommendation be in regards for being able to talk about that, either like finding new hobbies or being able to express the ones that you have better? What would your prescription for that be for those kind of people?
I mean, it's going to super depend on. There are two. I don't know if this can be generalized or not, but there are two broadly different approaches to like long-term relationships. One is seen as like, this is my lover and my best friend, and the other is seen as like, this is my lover and you better have your own fucking life because we're going to live very different lives. If you're going to have a partner that you are way more integrated with, it's probably important to have at least one shared hobby or interest. So that could be like watching TV shows together, or going mountain climbing together, doing something. But if you're in the relationship where like you're the wife and the husband, or the girlfriend and the boyfriend are like in very different social circles, you probably just need something to like loosely connect you. But that's going to depend on the preference of the people going in. And I know that people have really big divergences in like how much time do they want to spend with their partner when they're in a relationship.
Also, that is one of the things that patriarchy actually did a very big disservice to men when it comes to there are certain masculine things that is expected a lot of men to enjoy, right? It's like whether it is video games or football or shit like that. Now, I'm not saying every man falls down to this category, but in general, you get what I mean. When it comes to those norms, there is very little that men are, quote unquote, allowed to be interested in without, being looked as like less manly or weird or, feminine or stuff like that.
I think both men and women have a problem, especially with like the media culture that's existed in like the past 30 years, um, of like kind of feeling entitled to affection and entitled to feeling relationships. Like women have been told to feel entitled like that from tons of movies, and so have men. And I think like the answer a lot of the times is just to think of like who you find attractive and work on yourself in order to just be the type of person that that person would be attracted to, instead of just feeling like angry, or frustrated, or blaming other things like patriarchy or anti-patriarchy or whatever, about like why people are not finding you attractive or why you're struggling. um, there is there just tends to be, in my opinion, like there tends to be a weird entitlement, uh, that like, I mean, I feel like I used to have, a lot of people have, instead of just focusing on like working on themselves internally. People are still, I don't know, it's like one of those like old stereotypical things that's just like true, that if you stop like searching elsewhere and you start like working on yourself, people tend to come to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're pointing out to me is like that horseshoe again that I was talking about earlier, where people become resentful when you start to point necessarily. And don't get me wrong, I think there are reasonable like criticisms to make of both genders in terms of like the way that we allow ourselves to become, I don't know, you could say maybe manipulated by gender roles. But I do think that like there is a lot of merit to just better yourself in the sense that there's a non-zero, a non-insignificant proportion of people out there that want to be able to point to the difficulties and the criticisms of like the problems of our society or something like that, and it's not their fault. And when you move the blame into that territory and away from the personal responsibility territory, that's how you create resentful daters, right? And then it creates this cyclical thing where there's like more harmful, toxic views of each other in the dating sphere that become cyclical and resubstantiated.
Okay, let's maybe branch off of this. What do you guys think are like unfair expectations or views that are specifically placed on men?
Say that the expectation that men have to pay for the majority of things, especially as women like do better in the workplace and like do better in university, get more degrees, like start earning more. There's going to be a continuous trend of say like men who aren't dating. So like I can link another thing about there's a rising. Here's another like a poll about wait, that's the wrong one. But there's another thing I saw when I was like researching for this panel about there's more single people today than there were say like 1990, and part of that could potentially be is that a lot of the traditional things that have held traditional dating together, whether it's say like men making more than women and women like not dating down, but they never really had to before because of the pay gap. As the pay gap goes away, we have to be more okay with men earning less than their partners, or at least women do, or more women, or that 22% have to be more okay with that. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting a larger and larger pool of women who make more than men, or make more than the average man, and like both of their pools of partners are going to be reduced. So as we approach, to say like a gender equality in terms of pay, we have to approach gender equality in regards to like paying for things. And that's just going to be like something that we have to push for. But that's still, but that thing is, when you said about causing societal problems, acknowledging that these problems exist on a societal level is completely unhelpful for an individual person trying to navigate that situation. Like if I told like someone who's like struggling under capitalism,
2 sentences.
yeah, capitalism bad and it's making your life worse, that doesn't give them any more money. Like if that makes sense.
Yeah, the expectation that men always have to be outperforming socioeconomically is probably not good. We can probably lean into some feminist stuff here to find bad expectations of men. The really toxic idea that a man can like never be emotional or show any level of vulnerability, also probably not a good thing. That can play out in a few different ways depending on the relationship.
Let men be schizo.
It can
Also,
make a relationship passive
Yeah,
aggressive.
I'm gonna say
Also-
something really controversial.
In
I
general,
think the expectation that men should be living on their own is an unrealistic expectation. And I might be just saying this as a Canadian because like having your own place is really, really hard. But just in general, like it was the norm, like historically for thousands of years for men to live with their families, like especially in patriarchal societies, like people tended to, the wife usually tended to move in with her husband's family. And because it's the 20th century was almost like this super rarity where like the majority of people could afford to live in like their own households and stuff. So I think like that's a really unfair expectation, especially with like the housing costs in Canada and around the world that have really like increased. I think that's like, yeah, and especially like men feeling so much shame about living with their parents. I think is also really
that's actually something, to my observation at least, that is like extremely common, mostly in North America and maybe in Europe, but like in more, developing countries, I guess, or global south, or however you want to call it. In those countries, for example, in Turkey, that is not necessarily an expectation. You can still be like 30, 35, 40 and be living with your parents if you're not like in a relationship or if you're not married or something like that. That is a very Western expectation, if it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That's why like it's not when I talk to people like it's so common now for young men to be living like even into their 30s like with their parents, and they feel like so much shame, and some of them don't even like go into the dating market because they just feel like it's just a losing game because of what they've heard about it in films and TV and like Western media. But it's really just such a historical norm, and it's such a norm around the world that it's something that I think we should really particularly women should stop judging men so much for it all the time.
But it's also an advantage like to have your own place, right? Like because if you, whether it's like living with a bunch of roommates or living with your parents, right? Like a big like obviously for the worst, for like at least like 2 generations in America at least, having like your own place like to go back to after like the bar or after a concert or something, that's been seen as like a good thing, partially because like it's a status symbol. Also, if I want to fuck with somebody, like I don't want to coordinate with like my 6 roommates about like so they like get them out of the apartment so I can have sex, right? So like it's just like
I don't want to sound like an asshole. I'm just so curious, and I moved out at a very early age, so I understand it's different for different people. What is it like living with your parents when you're 30 years old? That seems like are you asking mom and dad, like, do they tell you what time you have to go to bed? Do you pay rent? Are they still making meals for you or doing laundry? Or like, what does that look like?
No, I don't live with my
Yeah,
parents.
I imagine, and I don't know exactly what we parse from this, but I imagine that in a lot of these other societies, like a lot of the time, the man who is living at home is like pitching in and is almost like, I don't know, and a lot of times probably taking care of his parents to some degree or helping substantiate the household. I don't know to what extent that's the case, but I'm not sure how I feel about this. Maybe I'm being a little bit steelmanny, but I do feel like maybe the reason for this difference is more so just I don't know exactly the reason for this without thinking about it, but I feel like in America, that reality where you're living, I do feel like there is a line at some extent where like just the descriptive reality that we live in is not one where people over a certain threshold of age that are still living with their parents are really doing much with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe
If you're, like, I feel like
I
if
don't know,
you're
you know what
30
I mean?
years old
Like,
and living with your parents, I feel like
It's
you fucked
it's
up.
kind of no, it's
Yeah,
kind of like a cultural difference because in Western countries, you all don't really expect, as far as I know, you all don't really expect like if your child is at a certain age and you are past a certain age, say you're retired or you never worked or something like that, but now they are taking care of you. But in countries in Middle East, this is very common. As a matter of fact, like if you're 30, if you're not in a relationship, it doesn't really make sense if you to those in that cult circumstances. It doesn't really make sense if you move out and pay extra, and B, now that your parents are retired or getting older, you take care of them until you start a family of your own. So that is like a symbiotic relationship almost.
I don't know what.
Yeah, it can
I don't
also
think you
be
should
like
be.
a really
You shouldn't be taking care of your parents at like age 25 or 30.
Like
No?
that.
Like,
That's what I was saying too. So like
how old are your
like,
parents? Are your parents like 40 years old when they're having you, or like because at 25 and 30, your parents should be in their 50s, maybe 60s. Like they should still be pretty healthy, right? Like
Only cultural differences.
Like I could comfortably see like stealing that point like this happened to my parents like in their late 40s early 50s when my grandparents passed away, and they had like my grandmother had to move in like because she needed a caretaker, right? But like say like obviously until 18 makes sense, and then I'd say probably like around like 40 years old is when your parents start like getting to that age of retirement where like they need assistance. I can see that making sense too. But
maybe
I
30s
would
if
say
they're a
the
little, yeah, like 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
But like when you're 20s, you're like taking care of your parents,
Yeah.
like 25, 26.
I think that's more financial. Like I think that has to be, and that's borne out like in terms of like being able to afford homes, being able to afford apartments without roommates, and like whether I think we'd give too much credit to say that like every person who's in their 20s is taking care of their parents, like if they're
Or
living at home
maybe
with
they're
them.
just making a really financially like smart decision.
That's true too. You could be saving like up
Because
to buy
I
a
moved
home.
out when I was a teenager, right? And because of that, like if I had lived with my parents, like I would have so much money now. Like I would have saved so much, and be able to like afford to buy and all of that kind of stuff. So there's like, and I know a lot of people who do the same thing. And some people want to do it, but they're just terrified of that shame, or they're worried it'll lower themselves in the dating market or something like that. When it can be like a really smart thing to do, for various reasons. I don't think it should be something that's like shamed at all.
I don't think it should be like shamed either. It just I think it's a sign of the times. I think there's too many people. Like 20 years ago, if you lived with your parents, you were a fucking loser. But now, I think it's like what 30% of people under like 30 are living with their parents, something crazy like that. Like at that point, I don't think it's an individual failing; it's a societal thing. And at that point, you should probably stop seeing it as an individual failing for like specific issues like that. I could still, but it's still a status symbol now, like where it's like, oh, the 70% of people that aren't living with their parents, they look even more like.
I guess here, so this is like, I can see this being of two worlds, right? So here is something that I would give people advice on. When you get a job, you need to make sure that you fill out your, I think it's your W-9 that needs to be filled out correctly so that your tax withholding is not too high. Because if it is, the government's gonna take a lot of money from you, and then at the end of the year, you're gonna get a big tax refund, which is pretty bad. But for a lot of people, that tax refund is actually probably a good thing, because had they gotten more money every paycheck throughout the year, every month, they would have just wasted the money on dumb shit. So I think about the living with your parents in the same way. If you live with your parents, you're working, you went to school, you got a degree, and you're doing it because it makes financial sense or whatever, but you are pretty independent, you're probably fine. But if you live with your parents and you're 30, and mom and dad make every meal for you, they still do your laundry to help you out, they pay for your cell phone, you're working like 12 or 14 hours a week on a part-time job, there's a problem here. By 30, if you're still living as a child with your parents, you have severely fucked up.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. Because what you said about how
If you're living as a child, yeah, I would agree.
because if you're making like say if you're living with your parents and you have a full-time job, then unless you're absolutely dumb as fuck and you're spending every like cent that you have, you should be saving money at some point likely to move out of the house, right? Like that's like supposedly that's the idea, is if you're using it as a financial stimulus, it's to get money to get out of that situation eventually. Like unless you want to do like a multi-generational home, which just I love my family, that sounds fucking miserable if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think most women, I imagine, would probably be pretty like not judgmental if like they found out that you were like 30 and living with your parents because you were taking care of them, right?
Yeah,
like,
and if you like you work full time and you do your shit, you handle your shit. It's like, yeah, I live with my parents still, or whatever, like I pay rent or whatever, like you've got your shit under control. I think it'd be okay.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
about
but you'd
the
have
point
to
at
like
which
really
you seem to
defend
indicate
yourself with
reliance.
it. Don't you
I
think so?
No, Eris is right there because like
No,
even
I
in
think it would
shows-
be. I think it would be obvious. I think as soon as they came over, if you have your own living space, everything's cool. That's fine. But if you like go home and like your bed isn't made, your floor, everything is a fucking disaster, whatever. Mom calls up like, "Honey, do you want to come down and eat with your girlfriend?" Like then you're pretty fucked. But I mean, I think it would be pretty obvious if the guy has his shit together and he just lives with his parents because it works conveniently financially, versus this guy is a 30-year-old child. I think it would be pretty obvious. That would be my guess, but.
No, yeah, that's definitely like when I was talking about like the cultural how it is in like Middle Eastern countries or like how common it is in Middle Eastern countries. I was referring exactly to what you were saying. Like people actually have their jobs and taking care of their parents until they get into a relationship, move out, start their own families, shit like that.
Yeah.
Say that's probably like the guy your shit together like while living with your parents thing. I'd say that's a lot more recent because I can remember like in different sitcoms and TV shows where you have like successful man like who has like making good money, but like, he just happens like say like live with his like mother because their father died or
Yeah,
something.
it's
So the
always
mom's
played for
like,
jokes.
yeah, it's played
Even
for
if he's
jokes
got-
all the time,
he's
even if
got
he's
it
like
put
super
together.
successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, there's always the thing where it's like, oh, you live with your mom. It's like, no, my mom lives with me. Like, da 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 da. Like, it's like it used to be a much bigger trope in the 2000s, as far as I can remember. But I think it's less now, specifically because I think more people are probably of the got their shit together variety, at least hopefully so, and like they're just more normalized to live with your folks.
Another thing that I think is like a really unfair expectation are like male bodies, particularly being like insanely buff. Like I know you're gonna really not like this one,
True.
Hans.
No. It's
But
hard, right? Like, because like this is one of the thing that comes up all the time, where it's like an attractive woman, right? To be an attractive woman, like just don't eat crazily all the time. Do a moderate amount of physical exercise. Like I'd say like the average super pretty like feminine body is pretty easy to attain, but like. I think it's more of the rise of superhero movies where it's like the male physique where you're like this gigantic like monster truck. That's a lot of fucking work like for a dude to get that big in comparison. Like be a relatively fit person because a relatively fit girl looks like super fucking nice, but a relatively fit guy looks like a normal guy, especially if he just has clothes on. Like Steven could be packing a six pack under there for all we know, but like because he's not like gigantically big, it doesn't look different than when he was like not exercising. So, I would say it's like the epitome of like male body like types are different, but I think most women would just appreciate a relatively fit guy. And a lot of women actually don't like the giant physiques. Like they don't like it. They think it's like either scary or intimidating or gross or what have you.
yeah, no, I totally agree.
I
Aren't
think
like a lot of
thankfully,
like
yeah, I
those
think
superhero actors like didn't it come out that they're all like they all have eating disorders and shit?
Oh, and like a majority of them are on steroids, so it's like
All of the Marvel ones are 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is that really damaging to your body?
If you do it correctly, it's not actually that bad for you. But it's still not.
Are you
It's not.
encouraging the use of steroids, Hans?
If you're going to use steroids, use them responsibly. But like, there's no fucking way that like like The Rock is like what like 55 or some shit, and he's still built like a brick shit house with like 8 abs. Like that's no fucking way to maintain that physique in your 50s without some sort of like chemical supplement. Like it's just not possible. And so I would say that is unrealistic for people like Chris Hemsworth or people like Chris Evans who are like pushing 40 years old and they have physiques like that and they're like, oh yeah guys, like just check out like my 6-week like calisthenic program and you'll
Chris
look like
Pratt's
oh.
like 6-month transformation was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
It's
like unreal.
I just ate chicken and broccoli, bro. Like I ran 3 miles a day. Like shut the fuck up. We know. Everybody knows.
I don't
Do you
think they
guys
lie
feel
about
that-
it though, right? Like it's their job to like look a certain way for movies. It's not like they're competing in powerlifting or something. Like, it's fine if they want to, right up to do it. It's probably I mean, other than creating unhealthy standards or whatever. But I mean,
So you guys would agree that there's like unfair expectations for like men's aesthetic. Do you guys feel that women expect that from men, or is it more men?
No, I don't think there's unfair.
Society
yeah.
expects from men, and a lot of people in all genders are, conforming to those norms. Because that is when we look at those expectations, we are not looking. You can't look at just one gender or the other and be like, okay, this is what men want and this is what women want, because those are not very subjective things. But a lot of things that we like, a lot of things that we prefer, a lot of things that we want to see or want to experience with our partners are very much, influenced by the society, by media, by movies that we are seeing, and what we learn or define love or a relationship as, or an ideal partner as. So I would say there's definitely extremely, unfair expectations in both genders, but I wouldn't say it is posed by the members of genders to begin with.
I would say for society where we're at right now, I think that the expectations for men are totally fine. I think you have a huge range of things that you can look like as a guy.
Acceptable body types,
yeah, like women are okay with dad bods, they're okay with like chubby dudes, they're okay with skinny guys, depending on there's a huge range. I think that the issue you get into is there is a hyper prescribed, very narrow band of what women can look like. I don't know if people in at least in our society even know what the fuck a real woman looks like anymore. Like we've moved past makeup into like makeup and surgery and filters. Even we have filters on people like Pokemon using filters on their videos now. I think that the way that a man can look, there's a huge range of what that is acceptable for. For women, it is so fucking narrow, and it is getting more and more ridiculous like every fucking day. Holy shit.
Something that really sucks is that there's and something that I don't really notice with men is that there are trends in women's body types. So like there are like during, I don't know, like the 1600s, in Italy, there's a specific female body type that's like really attractive, and that changes in the 18th century, and then in the 20th century, every 10 years, there's like a different, like 90s is heroin chic, and but then you have to gain 30 pounds to get a bunch of surgeries in the 2010s, and now they're saying that since Kim Kardashian lost some weight, that now like the being thinner is now again more attractive, and so people have to get rid of their BBLs and their surgeries and stuff. And I think that that's something that's just really fucking sucks, that like someone's body can go in and out of style.
Yeah.
I don't think the in regards like to the different body type expectations, I think Destiny's right in that there's a broad swath of things that are acceptable. But I would say, and I don't think women are pushing this on men. I feel like it's more of a societal, like a cultural movie thing, where it's like you like to be the big jack guy. I don't really ever see women saying like, oh gosh, like I want a guy that looks like that. It's mostly a lot of dudes like who like look around themselves and they feel inadequate because of that, because they're like, why can't I attain that? You know, I do my.
You don't
6
think
days
that
in the
women
gym.
also push stereotypes on one another as well?
On women,
Like, a lot of the
absolutely.
times-
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like-
that's
like-
why I feel
The
like
in the
that
case
is
of-
veering the norm.
Go meet.
I was just gonna say, I was gonna say, I agree with you absolutely on that. I just think that like in the case of men with the body types, I do, just for whatever it's worth, not to be dismissive of the issue or anything, but I do think that like the problem really is disproportionately some media conflation or whatever you want to call it, where because I've met so many men who are so fixated on their body and degree. It's like, bro, you have no idea how much wiggle room you have in the dating market to just fix like other things about yourself, and your body is totally fine. Like compared to women in the dating sphere, like it is not as big of a problem as you think it is.
Yeah, I got really fat over vacation. I was taking vacation for a couple weeks, and I legit just gained 10 pounds. I got to 260. I've never been that heavy before. No one never fucking noticed. Girls didn't give a shit. They're like, because it just doesn't matter. Like depending, as long as you aren't like grotesque, it's just easier.
Yeah, and I'll
There
say
are a lot more ways to overcome it as a man.
Yeah, I'll say, I'm sorry, there's so much cap in chat, including from Aber right now. It is just a reality. If you think anything different, you've been watching way too much Fresh and Fit or whatever your guys' brains are getting poisoned on. Like, when it comes to movies and culture, like, yeah, women are, hardcore, I like to watch, like, fucking Marvel and all these guys or whatever. But when it comes to real life, as a man, like, and it's funny because you guys will talk out of both sides of your mouth. People will say shit like this, like, if you're a man, you have to look a super certain type of way. But then on the other side, you'll be like, man, ugly men can get with any woman they want as long as they're rich. Well, what the fuck is it, right? As a man, I don't know who just said it. Wait, I think it was either Professor Mead or Hans just said that if you're a man, there's a lot of things you can do to elevate your status in the eyes of a woman by being successful, by being confident, by being funny, by having money. There are tons of things you can do as a man to elevate your status. But for a lot of guys, they don't give a fuck what a woman has, what she's accomplished. Like, if you're fugly, if you're butterface, if you're whatever, they don't want anything to do with you. Men have tons of ways to overcome. And if you want to deny that, that's fine. But you have to pick one or the other. You can't be like, oh, well, ugly guys, if they're rich, can get with any girl they want. And then also say like, oh, well, women all want guys look a certain way. That's not true. There are way more ways you can get over it as a man.
Is there anything then that... sorry, Ken.
In short, stop watching Fresh and Fit. Start, taking care of yourself. Pay attention to your, I don't know, hygiene and looks a little bit, and go to fucking therapy. Like, don't be a psychopath.
Is there anything?
And
Is there anything else you guys think is unfair toward men that, like, not that they're failing in, but society puts unfairly on men in dating specifically?
Isn't that what we just talked about, or were we?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just opening because I'm going to transition towards the end. So I
Okay.
wanted to make sure that
I've,
there's
I've
any
one more
final
thing
points that we wanted to make.
that might be super random, and I don't know if it would apply, but I feel like people put our society, normal society, like puts too much, basically like puts too much responsibility for someone finding a partner like on that individual. There's very little like matchmaking. The only matchmaking that we have now is like online dating, and there's obviously a lot of issues with online dating, and it's very focused on like just people like swiping on your photo and all that kind of thing. But I think in general, like I wish our society was much more focused on like matchmaking and helping people find partners and all that kind of stuff.
It's pretty true in that outside of how do you meet like partners, right? It's on Tinder, it's at like bars or social events, or
I feel
it's
like all those ways are
or-
really shit.
Yeah, no, you're right. Or it's like introducing, like I like hooked up with some people like while I was on vacation. I have an open relationship, it's okay. But like and a part of that was like I got introduced to like some really nice two really nice girls and a really nice guy by a friend of mine, like when I was visiting them in Cleveland, and I was like, oh, this is really great. And if I hadn't like known him, I wouldn't have met them. And like there was no way because they weren't on dating apps, they weren't doing that sort of thing. So it's like having friends that can introduce you to other people is so like much of a benefit.
Well, I'm
in
talking
terms of,
about
like,
something
building
more
relationships.
legislative than that, like government mandated
Wait.
girlfriends.
Why would we go there?
Right? Anyone down for government mandated girlfriends?
Well, naturally, but I'm biased. I'm lazy.
I don't know. I think like there's so much expectations on, on just like the chance that you'll just meet someone occasionally that just happens to be incredibly compatible with you, and you just happen to find attractive, and they just happen to find you attractive. Like I don't know, like the chances are just so insanely low, and it's just really weird that, especially now that most people don't go to bars and are not like super social and like IRL. It's like no wonder people are like lonely and don't have partners and stuff. Like we have no way to introduce them to people.
Yeah, there's a decreased amount of like not just men like not dating, but like women not dating too. Oh, like it's affecting men more, but it's
Right.
affecting both genders. Like they're both struggling with that sort of thing.
Yeah, the problem is that men are autistic as fuck and can't have emotional relationships with each other. So I think women are able to substitute out a lot of what they could get in a relationship with other friends, and men absolutely cannot do
True.
that. Yeah.
Can't be vulnerable with your bros; they'll make fun of you.
Like I don't know,
Well, true.
all my male friends are just insanely lonely.
Yeah, because
and
they don't
even the
have good.
ones-
Because men don't have good friendships.
Yeah.
Like women will
No.
talk to women about like very emotional things and have like very fulfilling, cool friendships, and like men will like talk to each other like and act like it's a normal conversation, and then literally commit suicide right after they hang up. Like it's an
Yeah.
unbelievable disconnect between the types of
But
relationships.
how do we get men to
I'm not,
put bros before hoes?
Well, it's not just that. Like I would even say like this could be like another thing that affects like the marketplace and like men and dating is that I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of men who like will fuck their female friends or they'll be attracted to their female friends and they'll think like, oh, like she's coming on to me. It's because women are comfortable having like emotional connections in relationships like that are just friendships, but men do not understand that whatsoever. So like if a girl is nice to you and she listens to your problems, you're like, oh shit, she wants to fuck me. Like it's very much like they're like they just don't comprehend. Like we just don't comprehend like
We
how
don't
to
build
have
that
those
scaffolding.
Yeah, no,
for
we
some
don't.
reason. Yeah,
So it's like
and we
like,
don't see it. We don't know how to do it because we don't know what it looks like, right? Like I speak other men, of course, not me, naturally.
you smiled at me. Like time to bang. Let's go.
So
But yeah,
why do men put so much value on sex and only value on sex? It seems like they're
Honest
not
to
gonna put
God,
effort in,
it's because for
Sex is
men,
fun.
no, it's not. That's not the case. It's because they want notches on their bedpost. Men suck at sex, and also so do women. Nobody actually enjoys sex. Nobody likes it. There's a very small subset of people do, but everybody you see on Instagram and all the sexy people and all the sex workers and cam girls and the super hot guys, they're barely fucking, and when they do, they hate it. And everybody's associations and engagement with sex is fucking horrible. 98% of them.
I think people fantasize. I think a lot of people, especially people that are deprived of it, I think they think of sex. They put it on this weird pedestal, and they look at it like, if I can achieve that, then I will achieve validation. Like they look at it and people will do this with other things, but one of the things they'll do it with is sex, where guys will look at sex like as the thing that they're missing, or as the validation that a woman can give them of themselves, or of them as a man, or something like that, to feed it, to like satiate ameliorate some insecurity. And I don't think it will. But I think a lot of times men, a lot of like incels or virgins who like that, espouse that kind of rhetoric or feel that way, who end up having sex, like feel disappointed, right? But I do think, for whatever it's worth, I think that's sort of like what's going on there a lot of the time.
Okay.
I think people want to have sex. I just think a lot of them are bad at it, and that
Uh,
disencourages other people.
yeah, I was going to say, like, what do you mean nobody likes sex?
How can someone be bad at sex? You just lie back and think of England and let him do his
I think
business.
it's because
And this is why we're part of the problem, Eris. Dead fishes, no respect.
I think the point
Fuck
is,
you. Move a
I think
little, wiggle. No one here except for Mr. Girl likes that.
He's
okay?
wiggling.
So,
It's okay.
Okay.
I think the point is that sometimes the things that a lot of people value about sex aren't really about the sex. It's because it's something that they attach to it in their mind, right? Yeah.
There is a lot of people who are actually seeking emotional validation that is, trying to find it through sex, which I think is very toxic, to be honest.
So when you say
Okay,
like
so we all agree that nobody likes sex. It's just there for a second.
I like sex.
No, I love someone. No.
Okay.
Well, I think we can agree that the problem so much isn't men being sexless, I guess, maybe, or maybe this is how I think about it, but the problem isn't so much men being sexless, but the way that they affix certain problems to being sexless, and how that like perpetuates this like cycle of misbehavior.
Isn't it a biological reality in that people like sex?
Yeah, your mom does.
I feel like you're being inconsistent here.
I mean, people like busting a nut. Like, is that the same thing as sex? Like, a lot of dudes just rub one out like 5 times a day.
Yeah, but I'm sure it feels a little better in like a vagina.
not
Yeah.
in a virtual one. I think the issue is that people have like, there's a very weird buildup in society around like hookup culture and around sex. And when I listen to the stories of people that are having sex and the type of sex they're having, a lot of it just seems really shit to me. But maybe people's standards on like what is good sex is really low, or maybe people just want to like get off and that's it, and then they leave. I don't know. I feel like we have a really toxic culture around like sex and sexual pleasure, but this is a conversation I've had a million times on Twitch and YouTube or whatever. The issue is that like nowhere in society are we ever talking about things related to sex or having good sex. It's literally just like, don't rape, and that's the whole conversation. And then nobody has any further conversation about it. So,
like, but the bar is.
You want to be a sex therapist?
Yeah.
Well, like,
sorry, Cam?
For your mom.
Like, so aside from like all the kitty people who can't do like the don't rape thing. Oh, I wish someone made me dinner. But like for this, that's a house husband right there, everybody. That needs to be more accepted. We need more of that. I want a guy like that.
Do you see how he
bringing
shows
me
up because
food.
he's being threatened by all the other men on the panel, and he's trying to
Oh,
assert
no,
himself
he's like,
there?
he has to
He's got to
demonstrate value.
Exactly. Wow. What do you think about that?
We're gonna get him back in
Erudite?
here
Yeah.
and flex just so he can
Yeah.
reassert
Let's
his
do
alpha
it.
maleness.
I'm ready. Show
True.
me. I'll show him my.
Hans is just talking with
Reinforce
his
those
Coomer brain right
toxic
now.
body standards.
Yeah. So what is sex for then? If people aren't like actually enjoying sex and stuff, I guess what I'm hearing is like a lot of people like take it as like a status thing, notches on the belt. I think I could be wrong. I suspect that a lot of people replace intimacy with sex. They think that the only way to achieve intimacy, especially I think men, is through sex, which you can be intimate with a person, especially physically, without necessarily having sex, like cuddling and just like getting in your physical touch.
True, but I would say for most men, if you're comfortable enough like to be like physically intimate and cuddling with somebody, you're probably also like having sex with them. Because like the only people that I would say 99% of men cuddle with are their like significant others.
Why though?
I would even actually go a step farther. Like, guys are probably more likely to be comfortable having sex with somebody than cuddling with them, right?
That's because of
True.
the fucking social conditioning, that like the pressure that is put on men to be like not emotional, not be vulnerable, not do nothing. A lot of high school or college culture also revolves around how many women you can sleep with if you're a man, and if like the more people you bang, the more men you are, the cooler you are. So we are taught as men, like cis men, are taught from like very young age to be less vulnerable, less emotional. Don't cry, don't talk about your emotions, be like macho, whatever. But at the same time, like fuck as many people as you can fuck, and that kind of messes up our fucking heads.
It's hard to project both vulnerability and strength at the same time. Not that you can't, not that vulnerability is like somehow exclusive to masculinity or something like that, but I feel like a lot of people don't know how to do both, and they like give up one, they abandon one in fear of the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
That's fair.
I have an idea. Men can start grooming one another, like apes do. You know, like
I'm down.
taking,
Listen,
taking out the blackheads of like their friend or something. Can't go wrong.
maybe we just if dudes just love each other enough, they'll model it enough, and then we'll fix each other, and then
I mean,
women will want to touch
actually
us
though,
again.
like
Fellas, is it gay to kiss your homies goodnight?
Yeah, that's like a disaster scenario for women because if men realize how base being gay is, we're not gonna fuck with women ever
True.
again.
This is
It'll
what
be
I'm
all
saying.
over.
I've been preaching. I call it homosexuality. It's been one of my newest positions.
Okay, I think we'll probably start transitioning towards wrapping it up here. Is there, so rather than ending statements, because I don't really know the point of them, we'll have your ending of, is there anything that wasn't said on this panel that you feel like is important to say around men, dating, expectations, fair and unfair, that you would like to end with? We'll start with Hans.
I don't really have much to say. Just for all my dudes out there, just do your best. If things aren't working, fix yourself. Either like work on your job, or work on yourself, work on your career, work on your relationships. Like, don't sit around and wait for someone to do the socialism, because you're just gonna be miserable your entire fucking life. So take some initiative to make your life modestly better in the meantime, and you'll be a lot happier, and so will all of your friends and family. So
Awesome. Cam?
Yeah, basically try to be a better person in any way you can be. Try to better yourself. And please, I cannot stress enough, if you need, and I know most men out there and most everyone out there needs it. If you can afford it, go to therapy. Emotional maturity is very important to healthy relationships.
Steven?
Yeah, I'd say fuck therapy. Figure your own shit out. Be a man. We don't do that shit. All hail the patriarchy. And that's all I got. Yes.
Based. All right, Eris?
I would just say be realistic about what you want in a partner and what you think, and do your research on what that person would want and try to work on yourself to become that. And if you don't think it's possible for you to become that, then maybe you're attracted to the wrong type of people and you just gotta work on that shit. I found I knew that the type of guy that I was gonna be attracted to wanted someone that was like good at traditional stuff like cooking and stuff. And so I made sure to learn to cook and I worked really hard on that. So, I'd say that would probably be really helpful. Also, don't rape.
Awesome. Professor Meat?
Yeah, I don't know. Uh, don't hate people or yourself for what they're attracted to. I think there's just a degree of tolerability that needs to be expressed here on both sides that will help that helps everyone out at the end of the day if we just are pragmatic about the situations we're in. Most of all, I guess I'll just say the thing that I feel most passionate about is we need if I'm going to say anything to dudes out there, there's a way to combine vulnerability and masculinity, and there's not much of a roadmap for that in our society, but it's probably, in my mind at least, it's one, I don't know, maybe one of the most foundational missing links that I guess guys are experiencing. So I'll just say that.
I got you, man. Just lift weights, cry on stream, and schizo post on Twitter.
Listen, I'm not lifting weights, but I do cry on stream.
I wanna drop something more. I wanna drop one more thing because essentially we are for men. I guess we all identify as men talking about dating here, but essentially if you're a man, if you're dating your partner, listen to your partner more than listening to us. Essentially, they're the ones that are going to guide you, they're the ones that are going to tell you what they like, they're the ones that are going to communicate with you what kind of a relationship they want, what is their expectations from the relationship. So listen to your partner first and foremost, and do go to therapy.
Awesome. I'll give one shout out to not Eli Monty since he died in a storm. He's not actually dead, but his streaming at least died.
I actually thought you meant he did. For a moment.
Just
Okay,
rolling
now
that
I'm
out
going to be
there.
super selfish. I'm only going to say like 5 minutes of your time though. So this is the first time I've moderated a panel. I actually recorded all of your guys' talking times the whole time to kind of track and make sure that we had just to see kind of who was talking more and less. And I tried to cap everyone at a minute and a half for talking. Oh yeah, Steven. Weighty. Hopefully you can bench as much as you talk.
If I ever see you, I'll kill you. Did you
Wait,
actually record the?
ooh.
Wait, did you record the total talking time or?
Wait,
I'm
I
going to
saw
compile that. So I did time sections because I was wanting to make sure nobody went past a minute and a half in a single kind of diatribe. I haven't compiled them yet, but if you guys want them compiled, I'll post them in this group chat. So just wait to leave this group chat until they're posted. Otherwise, you can obviously leave anytime. But before then, can you guys any feedback of how we could improve this? Was the size good? Were the rules good? Which is basically like, don't be super bad faith and be concise. Anything you would tweak to improve?
I just have one question. Erudite is an above-average woman physically, and Steven is an average man physically. So, Cam, who would win the fight?
Stephen is Professor Meat.
No, that's
Steven
not
is
Steven is
Destiny,
Destiny.
the answer.
Stephen's Destiny.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry about that. I don't know. I feel like there's a factor of things you can think about that. Like, if you're working out, if you're, have any.
Just your first instinct from like looking at both of them.
Hans, why are you trying so hard to rag on me? I would beat the shit out of Erudite. It wouldn't
No,
be
brother.
close,
Like,
okay? It would be.
we never.
This was more for him because he
No,
said there wasn't like a big
no.
difference.
We
I'm not
never,
trying to argue.
we,
Does the answer
we
change
never
if it's
like this entire
disagreed. We never disagreed on the fact that men are physically more stronger than average man is more stronger than average woman. I'm not talking about that. What I said is that fucking difference is in 2022 is fucking meaningless. I don't know why it is so fucking hard to understand, but
Also, the reason why
Wait,
women go for older men is that men glow up in their 30s, as evidenced by Steven. They see, I complimented you.
Shut the
Is
fuck
it-
up. I hate your
Look
glasses.
at you back in
You're
your-
such a
back
fucking
in your
loser,
StarCraft days
okay?
versus now.
You're such a
Holy
loser.
shit, dude, night
This
and
is
day.
this is really helpful feedback. Thanks, guys. Anything else?
Yes, I'm going to make two big statements, okay? One, 4 people panels. I think that's the future. It's got to be 4 people. Fuck it. That's number one, okay? Because I think there were some people on here, like I think Professor Meat tried to talk like 6 times at one point. He got cut off over and over again. I was like, oh shit. And I still had way more I could have said. I'm sure there's other people here. I think 4 people is the way to go. Fuck 6 people. Number one. And then number 2, I know that this is always the hardest part about doing these panels, but finding like a balance in who could represent each side is really important. I super disagree with Comrade Cam, probably on almost everything you say about this, but him having to be here like 1v4 or 1v3, Eris balanced it out a little bit, but that's like really brutal. But I know it's really hard sometimes to find the opposing people that are willing to come on and like represent both sides, so that could be different.
Yeah, I think Eli was kind of on the Cam side.
Yeah, he was.
We needed a femcel. We needed a femcel.
Absolutely true.
Great.
Well, maybe leaning on panels is rather than having kind of like moderates, far left and like right, I'd rather have only 2 of those because I feel like in panels where there's all of them, then if there's a conservative, at least like the far left and the center lefts typically will agree enough that they'll all just attack the conservatives and then the whole panel is just about attacking that conservative.
True.
Because I'd rather see either center attacking right or far left attacking far right or like something more like just 2 sides rather than 3.
I didn't even know we were doing sides before before today.
It's generally like we try to find people who I think will probably disagree enough that we can have like some level of debate.
Yeah, I think it's just a pragmatic thing. It's not you don't think about it too strictly in terms of they're on their side, but you need to have like some separation of these people are existing in this sphere, these people are existing in this sphere, so they can have contention.
Yeah, I was not expecting like a debate or something. I was like, we're just going to talk about, why dating sucks for men and what they can do to better themselves.
Yeah, that is true. Erudite, you did make this very combative for no reason, so.
Did I?
And she won the poll.
Get
so
it?
she
If men
definitely
just
kicked
stopped
your
raping, everything would be fine.
ass. Got him.
Okay, are we good? Can I leave, or are we still
Yeah, we're good.
prisoners? Okay, thank
Nope.
you so much for having us. It's been
Thanks,
fun,
guys.
okay?
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.